Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history gets strange but the voice stays calm. Tonight we drift softly into Victorian London, a city perfumed with progress and hypocrisy in equal measure. Here, respectability was performed like theatre, and those who couldn't afford the tickets simply played smaller parts. You'll follow one woman through a single day, from the chill of morning to the hush after midnight. A brothel worker in Haymarket, 1857. Her name could be Clara. It wasn't always, but history often forgets the real ones. She works in a house that calls itself respectable, where perfume covers the smell of coal and manners hide what everyone already knows. Before we begin, take a quiet breath. Let the sound of your own room fade into something older. A faint clatter of hooves outside, a cough in the fog, and the distant cry of a paperboy calling out the day's optimism. Imagine gaslight trembling against wallpaper the colour of old tea and a clock that ticks too loudly for comfort. If you're listening late at night, that's fine. Victorian London never truly slept either. And if you drift off halfway through, that's fine too. Clara will keep working and we'll still be here, unfolding her story slowly, like a curtain rising on another ordinary day. Now, settle in, dim the lights, let the past breathe softly in the dark, and step with us into a world where survival wore perfume and dignity was a rented costume. The first sound is wheels on cobblestone, a carriage passing too early for visitors and too late for innocence. The fog has seeped through the shutters again, leaving a thin silver breath on the wallpaper. London, as usual, smells of damp smoke and ambition. Somewhere nearby, a cat yowls at a trash cart, a perfect duet for the city's morning mood. Clara wakes under a wool blanket that never quite warms. Her breath leaves small ghosts in the air. She listens for the house before she moves, for the soft creak of floorboards, for the shuffle of Nora carrying water upstairs, for the distant clink of cups in the kitchen. Every sound tells her whether the day will be calm or chaotic. In this place, peace is measured in decibels. The wallpaper is patterned with faint flowers, each one slightly darker from years of smoke. There's a chipped basin on the dresser and a bar of soap that smells faintly of carbolic acid and lavender, an odd combination of purity and survival. Clara dips her hands into the water, cold enough to make her heart remember it's still beating. They say cleanliness is next to godliness, though here, godliness feels more like a landlord, expensive, demanding, and rarely seen in person. Downstairs, the house begins to wake. Mrs. Keating, the housekeeper, is already scolding Nora about the coal scuttle. Cook hums over the kettle, a tune as tuneless as the smoke rising from it. From the parlour, the faint voice of Mrs. Pembroke drifts upward, sharp, efficient, slightly sweet, like sugar over vinegar. She believes in schedules, decorum, and steady profit. It's her holy trinity, and the house runs by it. Outside, the city murmurs like someone turning over in their sleep. The lamplighter moves down the street, pinching out the last of the night one flame at a time. A milk cart rattles past, and the air thickens with a sour sweetness. Clara can hear boots in the hallway now, the other women moving about, preparing their rooms for the day's first inspection. Even the curtains must behave. The house itself is a masterpiece of deception. From the street, it looks perfectly respectable. 3 stories, lace curtains, a clean brass knocker. The kind of house where you'd expect to hear a piano lesson, not laughter behind closed doors. Inside, it runs like a small business with the emotional decor of a family and the efficiency of a factory. Every room has its rules. No raised voices, no drunkenness, and never open the door to anyone you haven't been warned about. London is full of gentlemen who forget to be gentle. Clara's hands are still red from washing when the bell rings once, the signal from Mrs. Pembroke's parlour. 7 o'clock sharp. The day has begun. Respectability, after all, must be punctual. Breakfast is the usual compromise. Bread, tea, a little jam if the budget allows it. Annie, her closest friend, leans across the table and whispers that Dr. Alcott will arrive soon. The weekly examination, required by law and endured by everyone, a ritual pretending to be protection. The men who made the law call it moral hygiene. The women who live under it call it Tuesday. Clara nods, tearing her bread into careful pieces. There's no point in worrying, the inspection is as inevitable as rent. Outside, a constable's boots scrape the pavement, a reminder that virtue here has its own patrol route. When the doctor arrives, the house shifts into a silence so polite it hurts. Dr. Alcott tips his hat, smiles with professional concern and compliments the house on its good order. Mrs. Pembroke beams as if tidiness itself might be contagious. He carries a leather bag that smells faintly of metal and soap. Everyone knows what's inside and everyone pretends they don't. Clara is called second. The examination room is small, green-walled, furnished like a modest sitting room with a single chair that feels like confession. The doctor speaks softly, records her answers in a notebook, and never quite looks her in the eye. It's all very civilised, which somehow makes it worse. When it's done, he thanks her for her cooperation. She thanks him for his time, and both know they're participating in a ceremony of appearances. Outside, Mrs. Pembroke compliments him again, and the house breathes out as the front door closes. Clara washes her hands in the basin once more. The water is colder now. She looks out the window. The fog is thinning. London begins to take shape again. Chimneys, carts, and the slow parade of people pretending to be in a hurry. She watches them for a long moment, trying to remember what it felt like to walk among them unnoticed. The city feels both enormous and claustrophobic, a stage so crowded there's no room for escape. Downstairs, the sound of the poker hitting iron marks the final note of morning. The stove roars to life, tea boils again, and Mrs. Pembroke's voice calls for clean linens. The house is ready for business, perfectly polite storm about to begin. If we wander a little deeper into this night, we'll find that the house itself has rhythms of its own, rituals polished by repetition, each one a quiet rehearsal for the performance yet to come. The morning thickens into motion, as though the house itself stretches its limbs. Every floorboard seems to remember its part in a daily performance. Steam sighs from the kitchen. A broom whispers across the hall, and someone hums a tune that never quite finds its melody. By the time the clock strikes 8, the place feels less like a home and more like a well-rehearsed factory of gentility. Mrs. Pembroke's voice drifts through the air like the sound of a silver spoon against china, polite, clear, and impossible to ignore. She moves from room to room in her dark satin dress, tapping the banister lightly with her fan as she goes. Her posture announces authority before she speaks. The women pretend not to listen for her footsteps, though every heart lifts a little when they fade down the corridor. Clara folds her bedding with quick precision, tucking the edges tight as though order might hold the world together. The quilt still smells faintly of powder and candle smoke, the small perfumes of last night's labour. She smooths the creases and steps back. The bed looks almost virtuous now, a quiet lie dressed in clean linen. She catches her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand and wonders which version of herself it will show today. The obedient tenant, the professional performer, or something unrecorded that slips between them. In the hallway, Mrs. Keating inspects the air like a customs officer searching for misbehaviour. She carries a ledger under one arm and a small feather duster under the other, as though morality might settle on furniture if unattended. She glances into Clara's room, nods once, and notes something in the book. Mrs. Keating believes everything important can be written down. Clara suspects that belief keeps her sane. Downstairs, Nora fights the coal scuttle again. The bucket is nearly her size, and every spill brings a new round of scolding. If you drop it once more, the devil himself will fine us for soot, Mrs. Keating mutters without looking up. The remark earns a quiet laugh from the kitchen. In a house like this, humour is currency. It buys small moments of rebellion. Nora grins despite the grime on her face and hauls the bucket toward the stove. Cook, already flushed from the heat, arranges the day's supplies on the table. Bread, jam, a small slab of salted beef, and a single pear that will later appear in the parlour's fruit bowl as decoration. "Luxury," she says, holding it up. "We'll let it rot in peace. Makes the place look refined." The others chuckle. Even false opulence has to start somewhere. By 9, the whole household moves in quiet choreography. The women dust mirrors, air out curtains, and polish the brass doorknobs that no guest will ever touch. The floor creaks under layers of effort, wood and bone in conversation. Outside, a street singer begins his morning hymn to commerce, selling newspapers in a voice that sounds both cheerful and doomed. Latest news, reform, progress. His tone suggests he believes none of it. Clara descends the stairs carefully, balancing a tray of folded towels. The stairwell smells of coal smoke mixed with lavender, the official scent of middle-class comfort. On the landing, Mrs. Pembroke stops her with a look that could qualify as applause. "Keep the parlour curtains half drawn," she says. "It gives a sense of modesty." Clara nods. Modesty here is measured by the density of lace. The parlour is the house's proudest illusion. Sunlight filters through the curtains, turning dust into polite glitter. The furniture is arranged for conversation rather than confession. Velvet chairs, a polished table, a vase that pretends to hold fresh flowers. Every item performs a role. Even the clock on the mantel ticks with deliberate virtue, announcing each second as if time itself were on its best behaviour. Clara sets the towels down and glances at the portraits on the wall, faded engravings of noblemen no one can name. Their eyes follow her, solemn and forgiving, as though silently approving of her efficiency. She wonders who they once were. Probably patrons of something respectable, which, in London, covers nearly everything unrespectable done discreetly. The back door creaks open and closes again. Dr. Alcott's visit has already shifted the day's rhythm. His carriage wheels have barely faded, yet the echo of his presence lingers, the smell of soap and judgment hanging in the hallway. Mrs. Pembroke has ordered the sheets in the examination room to be boiled, a ritual more symbolic than sanitary. Nora carries the bundle to the wash basin, humming as if to drown out memory. Annie appears beside Clara with a tray of teacups, her sleeves rolled up, hair escaping its pins. "He smiled at me this time," she says, half amused, half proud. "Perhaps next week he'll remember my name." Clara smiles faintly. "Perhaps next week we'll remember his." They share the smallest laugh, the kind that vanishes before it can be overheard. The morning continues its careful march. At 10, Mrs. Pembroke dictates the week's expenses to Mrs. Keating, who writes each figure with the gravity of scripture. Coal, 2 shillings. Soap, 4p. Linen repairs, 6p. Respectability, priceless, murmurs Cook from the doorway. The ledger remains impassive. Even irony must be accounted for. Outside, a street organ begins to play. The notes drift through the open window, carrying the scent of the rain. Clara pauses by the sill, watching a woman hurry by with a basket of bread balanced on her head, a child trotting behind her. For a brief moment, the line between worker and passerby blurs. Both rise early, both labour for survival, both perform their duties under the same unpromising sky. The difference is costume, not condition. At 10:30, Mrs. Pembroke gathers everyone in the hall. "We will have guests this evening," she announces, her tone suggesting divine visitation. "An officer, a merchant, and a man of letters, all recommended." She nods toward the parlour. "Keep it tidy, polite lighting only. Too much brightness is vulgar." The women exchange glances. Vulgarity in their world is simply enthusiasm shown at the wrong moment. After the meeting, Clara returns to her room. She straightens the bed again. Not because it needs it, but because it gives her hands something to do. The city hums through the walls, a low, endless sound like breathing. Somewhere a church bell rings noon, the daily reminder that faith and fatigue keep the same schedule. She sits on the edge of the bed and opens the small box under her pillow. Inside lies a ribbon, a coin, and a scrap of paper with a verse copied from an old hymn. There is rest for the weary, but not in this life. She doesn't remember where she first heard it. Perhaps from a customer, perhaps from her mother, perhaps from no one at all. The words have followed her here, staying quiet until moments like this. A knock on the door. It's Annie again. Her hair pinned properly now, her cheeks flushed from scrubbing. "Mrs. Pembroke wants you to help with the new curtains," she says. "The lace doesn't fall right." Clara smiles. "Neither does gravity, but we live with it." Annie laughs softly, and they walk together down the corridor. In the parlour, Mrs. Keating supervises as if orchestrating a military manoeuvre. The curtains billow with each draught, and the women struggle to pin them into civility. "Higher, Clara, lower, Annie." "There, balance," she says, stepping back. The result looks exactly the same as before, but everyone nods as though the world has been improved. By afternoon, the house gleams with expectation. Mirrors shine, rugs lie perfectly flat, and the faint smell of polish replaces the morning's coal. Mrs. Pembroke surveys it all, her face settling into satisfaction. "We are ready," she says. The statement hangs in the air like a blessing or a warning. Ready for what is never entirely clear, clients, judgment, or simply another day that must be survived beautifully. As the women disperse, Clara pauses at the parlour door. For a moment, she imagines the house without people. Furniture resting, curtains breathing softly in the dark, silence stretching across every floor. It would look peaceful, almost pure, if one didn't know what evenings brought. She exhales, feeling the weight of that knowledge settle again like dust. Then she turns back toward the stairs, the rhythm of her steps joining the heartbeat of the household machine. From here, the story opens into the quieter hours between duty and desire, where a little gossip, a little tea, and a little laughter help keep the machinery from grinding to a halt. By midday, the light that leaks through the curtains is pale and uncertain, as if even the sun is hesitant to enter Haymarket. The air carries a taste of soot and boiled cabbage from the alley below, the smell of London's working class, drifting upward like an unfinished prayer. Inside the house, the noise has softened to its afternoon hush. The morning's cleaning is done, the doctor has come and gone, and Mrs. Pembroke's voice has, mercifully, fallen silent. Clara sits by the window with a half-mended glove in her lap. The motion of the needle is automatic, her fingers moving from habit, more than thought. She used to do this for a living, row after row of identical stitches in a workshop that smelled of damp wool and hopeless ambition. Back then, she earned 3p for a full day's labour, barely enough for bread and a corner of a bed in a shared lodging. Every evening she left the factory with eyes burning from gaslight and lungs coated in lint. Respectable poverty, they called it. Respectable because it was visible and silent. She still remembers the night she stopped going. The overseer had docked her wages for a dropped spool, and the landlady raised her rent in the same breath. She'd walked out into the fog and realised that being proper had cost her everything except the hunger in her stomach. That hunger, steady, logical, did what sermons could not. It taught her mathematics. If a day's sewing earned 3p and a single night's company could bring a shilling, the calculation solved itself. The first offer came through a friend, of course. It always does. A girl named Elsie from the workshop had vanished for a week, then returned in a new shawl, eyes bright and strange. She spoke softly about a house near the market that paid in meals and warmth instead of empty praise. "No one asks for your references," she'd said. "You only have to keep your manners and your wits." That sounded almost respectable. And Clara, 23 and tired of mending other people's gloves, decided to mend her own life instead. The memory of that first evening arrives uninvited. The way the gaslight painted everything gold, the way Mrs. Pembroke looked her up and down like a tailor measuring fabric, and the way her nerves hummed between fear and relief. She'd expected shame to feel sharp. Instead, it felt like exhaling after holding one's breath too long. She pricks her finger on the needle, a tiny bead of red rising like punctuation. It reminds her that even freedom requires maintenance. The glove lies finished in her lap, a small piece of dignity she can still repair. Annie knocks softly at the door before entering, carrying 2 cups of tea that have already cooled. "You're working again," she says, setting 1 cup down. "You'll make the rest of us look lazy." Clara smiles faintly. Old habits. The needle still thinks it's earning a living. Annie settles beside her on the edge of the bed, balancing her cup carefully. "At least this job comes with hot water sometimes. I used to scrub floors till my hands cracked. They paid me in leftovers and lectures." "Better lectures than landlords," Clara says. They both laugh quietly, the kind of laugh that tastes of survival rather than joy. For a while they sit without speaking, listening to the muted city outside. Somewhere a street preacher bellows about virtue, his voice swallowed by passing carts. Annie raises an eyebrow. "They always shout louder when they're near us," she says, "as if volume makes them pure." "Maybe it does," Clara murmurs. "If so, the whole city is saved." Their laughter fades into comfortable silence. Annie traces a circle on the fogged window with her finger. "Do you ever miss it?" she asks. "Before all this?" Clara considers. "I miss believing things would improve if I just worked harder. It was a kind of faith, I suppose, but I don't miss the cold. Or the hunger," Annie adds, "or the feeling that life belonged to someone else." Below them, a costermonger calls out the day's prices. The numbers blur into rhythm, each coin another syllable in the poem of necessity. Clara watches him for a moment, the basket heavy on his shoulder, his eyes dull with fatigue. He could be anyone. She could have been his sister, his wife, his shadow. Survival doesn't choose its costume, it wears whatever fits. The clock on the mantel strikes 1. In the parlour, Mrs. Pembroke is meeting a supplier, a woman who brings ribbons, rouge and gossip from the fashion houses. Business, as always, dressed in respectability. The rustle of paper and polite laughter filters through the floorboards. Every trade, Clara thinks, has its paperwork. Annie drains her tea and sets the cup aside. Mrs. Keating says the new curtains cost more than a week's coal, but the gentlemen like lace, so lace it is. "Coal keeps us warm," Clara says. "Lace keeps us employed," Annie replies. "Warmth and wages seldom agree." They share another small smile. Humour in this place is a form of hygiene. It keeps despair from breeding. Clara stands and stretches, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders. The needlework has left faint impressions in her fingertips, as if memory itself were stitched there. She opens the window a little. The air that rushes in is thick but moving, alive with the city's contradictions, smoke, perfume, and possibility. Somewhere, a church bell answers a factory whistle, as if holiness and industry had struck a truce for the afternoon. She thinks of the women still bent over sewing machines, the rhythm of the pedals beating time into their bodies. She knows some of them whisper her name with a mixture of envy and pity. The truth is less poetic. Freedom, when rented by the hour, is merely another shift. Warmer, perhaps, but not simpler. Downstairs, Nora calls out that lunch is ready. The scent of broth rises through the stairwell, humble and comforting. Annie heads for the door. "Come on," she says. "If we're late, Mrs. Keating will deduct it from our good humour." Clara nods, placing the mended glove on the dresser. The thread gleams pale against the dark fabric, a small, invisible success. In the hallway, voices echo softly, blending with the clink of spoons. Cook has outdone herself. Soup, thick enough to be convincing, bread still warm from the oven. The women gather around the table, their chatter low but constant. For a few minutes, the house feels like what it pretends to be, a home. Mrs. Pembroke enters halfway through the meal, eyes sharp as ever. "Ladies, this evening we will receive visitors. Be ready by 6. And remember, courtesy is not optional." She leaves without waiting for acknowledgement. The door swings shut behind her like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Annie leans closer to Clara. "Do you think she was ever one of us?" Clara shrugs. "Maybe once. Maybe that's why she's so efficient." They eat in silence after that, each woman lost in her own arithmetic of hope and memory. Outside, the fog thickens again, erasing the outlines of the street. It always returns, like a debt that can't be paid off, the same grey curtain, hiding everything and revealing nothing. When the dishes are cleared, Clara returns upstairs. The afternoon light has turned the walls a dim gold. She sits by the window again, but this time without her needle. Her hands rest quietly in her lap. The house hums around her, alive with the small sounds of maintenance. For a moment she lets herself imagine another version of her life, one where the fog is just weather, not camouflage. A knock at the door interrupts the thought. Mrs. Keating stands there with a folded note from Mrs. Pembroke, the evening schedule. "Visitors at 7, she says briskly. "Polite company. You and Annie will serve tea first." Clara thanks her, takes the paper and places it on the table without reading it. The ink smells faintly of rosewater, as if the instructions themselves required perfume. She sits back and watches the daylight fade, that slow Victorian melancholy seeping into every corner. Outside, the lamplighter begins his rounds again, one small flame at a time. The city prepares for its nightly masquerade, and so does she. The path now carries us toward the next quiet moment. We'll see how the evening transforms the house, how civility becomes costume, and how every polite gesture earns its living in candlelight. By late afternoon, the house settles into a strange stillness. Not quiet exactly, but the kind of pause a theatre takes just before the curtain rises. The air carries a faint scent of boiled linen and lemon oil. Downstairs, the last of the laundry hisses on the drying rack while the parlour clock counts the minutes in perfect politeness. Everyone knows what comes next. Dr. Alcott is due for his second visit of the week. No one ever calls him by his first name. He doesn't seem to have one. He appears and disappears like a well-trained ghost, leaving behind a faint trace of antiseptic and awkwardness. His arrival is both dreaded and expected, a ritual that belongs more to the city than to the women who must perform it. Mrs. Pembroke paces the hallway, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt. Her expression is that of a woman preparing to entertain royalty, though the guest in question is neither royal nor entertaining. Clean hands, calm faces, she reminds everyone, as if composure could disinfect reality. Nora, too young to fully grasp the humiliation, polishes the brass doorknob until her own reflection blurs into it. "He'll be here any moment," she whispers. Her tone makes it sound like weather. When the doorbell finally rings, the sound cuts through the air like a bell at prayer time. Solemn, unavoidable, faintly absurd. Mrs. Pembroke straightens her posture, draws a breath, and opens the door. Dr. Alcott steps inside, removing his hat as though entering church. He greets her with a small nod, the sort reserved for colleagues or confessors. Behind him, the street fog hesitates, unwilling to intrude. "Good afternoon, Doctor," says Mrs. Pembroke, her smile rehearsed but flawless. "The ladies are ready for inspection." He bows slightly. "Very good. I trust the house remains orderly." "As ever," she replies. The words sound both proud and defensive. Clara watches from the stairwell, hands folded before her, posture immaculate. It's not fear she feels anymore, just fatigue polished into discipline. The doctor carries a black bag with brass clasps, polished to the same dull shine as his conscience. Its contents are familiar to everyone, the instruments of reassurance, none of which actually reassure. Mrs. Keating appears beside him with the ledger, that sacred book of compliance. She notes the hour, the weather, and the doctor's initials as though documenting a rare astronomical event. "We're fortunate," she murmurs, "to be under such reliable supervision." Her voice trembles slightly on the word fortunate. The examination room occupies the small space beside the kitchen. The curtains are drawn halfway, enough to suggest modesty without promising privacy. The wallpaper peels at the corners, showing faint scars of old damp. A single chair sits in the centre, its cushion replaced so many times it has lost all memory of softness. On the table, a folded sheet, a small basin, and a stack of papers. Cleanliness displayed like confession. The first to be called is Annie. She walks in with her chin high, pretending the air doesn't sting her lungs. Behind her, the women wait along the hallway, each listening for the closing door, each measuring silence like a heartbeat. Clara stands third in line. She watches Mrs. Pembroke hover near the doorway, ready to translate discomfort into decorum if necessary. No one speaks. No one dares to breathe too deeply. Inside, Dr. Alcott clears his throat. His voice carries the calm of someone paid to appear neutral. He asks the same questions every week. Any discomfort? Any fever? Appetite steady? Each question feels like a riddle to which the wrong answer might cost a livelihood. Annie replies softly, her tone respectful but detached. The exchange lasts only minutes. When she exits, her face is unreadable. Clara steps forward next. Her shoes make no sound on the wooden floor, a skill learned from survival. The room smells faintly of iron and soap, the scent of forced civility. Dr. Alcott gestures to the chair. His gaze remains politely averted. The procedure is brisk, professional, and utterly impersonal. He might be inspecting a piece of furniture. For a moment, Clara feels as if she's disappeared entirely, replaced by an object with paperwork. When he finishes, he notes something in his ledger. "All satisfactory," he says. His tone suggests he's reading from scripture. Clara adjusts her sleeve, the gesture small but steady. "That's good," she replies, her voice even. It isn't defiance, it's ownership of sound. She steps back into the hallway, where Mrs. Pembroke stands waiting with her approving smile. The performance resumes, complete with applause in the form of polite nods. One by one, the rest follow. The house runs like clockwork, patient, punctual, predictable. When the doctor finally closes his bag, Mrs. Keating hands him an envelope with practised discretion. "For your trouble, sir." "Always a pleasure," he says, meaning none of it. He places the envelope in his coat pocket and bows slightly. "Good day, ladies." As his footsteps fade, the tension dissolves like air after thunder. Nora exhales loudly, earning a glare from Mrs. Keating, but no real reprimand. "He's gone," Annie whispers, half laughing, half shaking. Cook wipes her hands on her apron and mutters, "May the good Lord grant him indigestion." It's the closest thing to a prayer the house allows. Mrs. Pembroke, still at the door, watches the doctor's carriage disappear into the fog. "Well done," she says at last. "Let us remember, the law protects the virtuous." Her tone carries no trace of irony, though the words hang heavy with it. She closes the door firmly, shutting out both fog and reflection. The women scatter to their rooms, each needing space to recover from civility. Clara returns upstairs and washes her hands, though they are already clean. The water in the basin is cold, almost sharp, a reminder that some rituals exist purely to make sense of the senseless. She looks down at her reflection trembling in the water, pale, calm, detached. For a moment she wonders if the doctor ever sees his own reflection with the same distance. Outside, a horse neighs, the sound echoing against the row of houses. The city has already moved on. Somewhere another bell rings, another household straightens its curtains. London's great machine turns, fueled by manners, soot, and silent endurance. By 5 o'clock, the house has resumed its ordinary rhythm. Mrs. Pembroke dictates notes to Mrs. Keating for the next week's schedule. Bath days, supply orders, visitors of good character. Clara listens from the stairwell, the words flowing together like background music. Good character, she thinks, is the city's favourite costume. One size fits all. In the kitchen, Annie is making tea. She hands Clara a cup and says quietly, "Do you ever wonder what he thinks of us?" Clara takes a sip before answering. He probably doesn't. That's how he sleeps at night. Annie nods. Then he must sleep very well. Clara smiles faintly. He's paid to. They drink in silence for a while, the steam fogging the window. Outside, the lamplighter moves past, raising small suns along the street. The glow spreads through the fog, turning the world gold for a moment before it fades again. The city always looks beautiful when viewed from behind glass. Beauty, after all, is another form of distance. Mrs. Pembroke's footsteps echo again. "Ladies, prepare yourselves. The evening is for presentation." Her voice slices through the calm. The women disperse, returning to their mirrors and ribbons, each resuming her role in the nightly play. Clara lingers by the window a moment longer. The fog has thickened again, swallowing the outlines of the street. Somewhere beyond it, the doctor's carriage wheels fade into silence. She wonders if he ever looks back at the houses he visits, or if his conscience travels lighter without direction. The clock downstairs chimes 6. Another day inspected, documented, and declared healthy. The irony is almost comforting. At least someone believes the system works. Clara finishes her tea and sets the cup aside. Evening is coming, and with it, the second act of survival. As we drift further into the story, the lights will change, the voices will soften, and the house will trade its cleanliness for charm, an exchange as ancient as civilization itself. The day edges toward evening, when the fog softens to a silver curtain, and the streets begin their slow exchange of daytime commerce for nighttime appetite. Inside the house, everything turns ritual. The air thickens with steam and perfume. A faint note of soap drifts beneath it, like a polite apology for what is to come. Clara stands in line outside the narrow bathing room. The door is cracked open, releasing clouds of warmth into the chilly corridor. Inside, Nora pours hot water from a dented kettle into a copper tub. Each trip takes her 3 minutes and a small sigh. The house owns only one tub, shared by everyone, so order must be maintained with military precision. There is a list on the wall written in Mrs. Keating's stern handwriting. 10 minutes per person. Soap rationed. Towels reused unless otherwise unfit for purpose. Mrs. Keating has a gift for making necessity sound like etiquette. Clara's turn comes next. She steps inside and closes the door. The mirror above the basin is cracked across one corner, dividing her reflection neatly in two. The water is hot enough to sting. It feels like re-entry into her own skin. She sinks slowly, exhaling as if the day's noise dissolves into the steam. The scent of lavender and something sharper, carbolic soap perhaps, fills the air. Cleanliness here is not comfort but ceremony, a way to erase traces of others before the next chapter begins. She washes her hair with a bar softened by too many hands. The soap leaves a faint grit of ash. Around her, the sound of dripping echoes in the small space, a metronome of solitude. She thinks about how every bath in this house carries two intentions, the practical and the psychological, one to clean the body, the other to persuade the mind. No one says this aloud, but everyone knows. Through the thin wall she hears Annie humming in the hallway. The tune is familiar, a sailor's song turned lullaby. It rolls through the house, low and soft, a comfort that no prayer could match. "You sing like you're trying to calm the sea," Clara calls through the door. "It's the only sea I can afford," Annie answers, laughter blending with steam. When Clara steps out, she wraps herself in a towel that smells faintly of starch. The air feels lighter now, as though she has rinsed off a layer of obligation. On the table near the door sits a small tin of rose powder. She dips 2 fingers and touches her cheeks, the gesture more habit than vanity. In a world obsessed with appearances, self-respect is measured in the weight of powder and patience. Mrs. Keating appears at the end of the corridor, clipboard in hand. "Hurry along, ladies," she calls. "Evening approaches and gentlemen prefer punctual cleanliness." Her words echo off the walls like scripture. Nora rushes past with another bucket, sloshing water across the floor. "Sorry, Ma'am," she mutters. Mrs. Keating sighs but lets it pass. Discipline, even in her universe, has to coexist with exhaustion. Clara returns to her room to dress. The air there is cooler, scented faintly with coal dust from the street. On the bed lies her evening gown, a soft grey with pearl buttons and sleeves that whisper rather than cling. She fastens the bodice slowly, each button a small negotiation between comfort and appearance. The mirror reflects her transformation, the working woman turning back into the illusion of gentility. Her hair, now dry, is pinned into the same careful shape as always. A small silver brooch catches the lamplight, proof that respectability can be borrowed like jewellery. Annie enters, hair still damp and shining. "You look like you belong at a dinner party," she says, fastening her own ribbon. "I am," Clara replies, smiling faintly. "Just not the kind that ends with dessert." Annie laughs, setting down a tray of cologne bottles. "At least we serve better conversation." The two sit for a moment, adjusting ribbons, smoothing fabric, perfecting the illusion. The rhythm of their work feels almost holy. There's no priest here, no sermon, yet everything has the gravity of ritual. They know exactly how much powder hides fatigue, how much smile softens judgment, how much laughter passes for grace. Respectability is a costume, but it takes skill to make it look effortless. From downstairs comes the sound of cook setting plates on the table, the clatter muffled but steady. The smell of roasted meat drifts upward, a rare indulgence reserved for nights when paying guests are expected. "Mrs. Pembroke's investing in appearance again," Annie says. "The beef's for show. We'll get what's left of the gravy." "It's the same in churches," Clara says, fastening her shoes. "They feed the choir last." The 2 women exchange glances, amusement flickering between them. For a brief moment, the house feels lighter, almost human. Humour, here, is disinfectant. Cheap, effective, and available without prescription. When they descend the staircase, the house is already glowing. Lamps burn behind gauze curtains, turning the parlour into a soft haze of gold. Mrs. Pembroke stands at the base of the stairs, her dress black satin trimmed with pearls, her expression a blend of piety and profit. "Ladies," she says, "remember, gentle laughter, steady posture, and above all, discretion. The evening will bring opportunity. Let us look deserving of it." Mrs. Keating hovers beside her, clutching the visitor ledger. The list of expected guests reads like a parody of morality. An officer, a merchant, and a scholar. London's virtue, wealth, and wisdom, all arriving after sunset. In the parlour, the furniture gleams under candlelight. Fresh linens cover the tables, and a vase of artificial flowers pretends at life. The curtains are drawn halfway, just enough to suggest modesty while leaving curiosity unpunished. Clara arranges teacups on the tray, careful not to clink them. Annie follows with a silver pot polished to the edge of vanity. The air smells faintly of sherry, citrus peel, and effort. They move with silent coordination, the product of long rehearsal. Every gesture is softened, every movement a performance of grace. The art lies not in deception, but in timing. The gentlemen who visit here want 2 things at once: to believe in their own decency and to forget it temporarily. The house sells both, elegantly packaged. Clara catches her reflection again in the glass of the window. Outside, the fog presses against the panes like an audience waiting for the play to begin. For a heartbeat, she imagines stepping through it, walking past the lamplighter, past the watchman, past the invisible boundary that separates the city's stages. But the thought passes, as all wild thoughts must. She turns back to the room where the candles flicker and Mrs. Pembroke rehearses smiles in the mirror. The bell rings, once, twice, polite but certain. The first guest has arrived. Mrs. Pembroke straightens her collar. "Ladies," she says. The curtain rises. Clara inhales the mixed scent of soap, perfume and faint candle smoke. The house hums with poised anticipation. Everything is in place. The curtains, the manners, the masks. The ritual of cleanliness has done its work. As the night breathes again, the story keeps unfolding. The polite hush of evening will dissolve into conversation and sherry, where every compliment is currency, and every smile a kind of negotiation. Evening begins, as it always does, with bread. Not the soft kind from bakeries in Mayfair, but the sturdy, half-stale sort that has seen more days than it should. Cook slices it carefully, as though precision can turn it into luxury. The knife scratches against the wooden board, echoing through the kitchen like the prelude to prayer. The women gather slowly, drawn by the smell of warmth. The air is heavy with the mingled scents of bread crust, broth, and the faint sweetness of cheap jam. The long table, usually polished to propriety, now holds the essentials of endurance: a loaf, a pot of tea, and a jar of strawberry preserves thin enough to be called hope. Mrs. Keating sits at the end with her ledger open, because even supper must be documented. Clara takes her usual seat by the window, where a weak draught keeps the air from feeling too thick. She spreads jam across her slice with the care of someone painting a miniature portrait. "We dine like queens," she says softly, her tone half amusement, half gratitude. Annie grins. "Queens of economy, maybe." Cook looks up from the stove. "Hush now. The secret to royalty is confidence. Eat like you deserve it, and the bread behaves better." They laugh quietly, the kind of laughter that doesn't need to be loud to feel alive. It fills the space between the clinking of cups and the scrape of chairs. For a brief moment, the kitchen becomes something close to a home, a strange borrowed peace that exists between transactions. Mrs. Pembroke doesn't eat with them, she rarely does. Her meals arrive on fine china upstairs, a performance of refinement even when no one watches. The women joke that she's training, for heaven, where dinner will always be served on time. Mrs. Keating disapproves of the joke but writes nothing in her ledger. Not everything belongs to record. Nora bursts in with a tray of extra cups, cheeks flushed from running. "The lamp's gone out in the hallway," she says, breathless. "Should I fetch another candle?" Cook waves her off. "Let it be dark for once, darkness costs nothing." Mrs. Keating tuts under her breath but doesn't argue. Economy and exhaustion often negotiate their own compromises. They eat. The bread softens as it meets tea, and the steam fogs the edges of the window panes. Outside, the first lamplighters move along the street, little flames hopping from post to post like cautious stars. The glow seeps into the room, turning the air amber. For a moment, everything looks almost gentle. Annie tears her bread into small pieces. "Do you ever think about saving?" she asks. "Saving what?" Clara replies. "Money, for one." Clara smiles faintly. "Every week I plan to. Every week the city laughs." Annie nods, sipping her tea. It's a cruel sort of arithmetic. You start with hope, subtract rent, food, coal and manners, and you're left with change small enough to buy silence, Cook chuckles. And silence is the only thing worth buying. Mrs. Keating looks up from her ledger. A wise woman invests in her reputation, she says. When the time comes to leave this life, it will serve her better than coin. Annie tilts her head. "And when will that time come, ma'am?" Mrs. Keating hesitates, pen hovering over paper. "When the good Lord permits," Cook mutters, "or when the rent runs out." The laughter returns, quiet and nervous but real. Humour, like tea, loses strength when left to stand too long. Clara finishes her bread and leans back. Her stomach feels warm for the first time all day. The sound of the street drifts in. The clop of hooves, the distant shout of a newspaper boy, a harmonica playing somewhere too cheerfully for the hour. She imagines the people out there, clerks heading home, mothers carrying laundry, young couples walking close enough to share each other's breath. All of them respectable, all of them pretending not to know places like this exist. Annie follows her gaze. Do you think any of them see us when they walk by? Of course, Clara says. They just rename what they see until it feels proper. What do they call it? Loneliness, Clara says, but dressed in better clothes. Mrs. Pembroke's bell rings upstairs, a delicate chime that sounds less like command and more like punctuation. Guests arriving, Mrs. Keating announces, closing her ledger. Ladies, finish up. The women set down their cups and rise, smoothing skirts, adjusting hairpins, returning to their roles with the grace of habit. Cook clears the table, muttering something about saints and supper. Nora scurries toward the parlour with a towel to wipe. The handle's clean. As they prepare to leave, Clara pauses by the doorway watching the others. They move together like a small orchestra, each knowing her cue, each pretending the music is their own. It's not quite joy, but it's close enough to keep breathing for. Mrs. Keating catches her eye. What are you waiting for, Clara? Nothing, she says, just enjoying the quiet before the applause. In the hallway, the women straighten their dresses and check their reflections in the darkened window. The fog outside presses close, turning the glass into a dull mirror. Clara touches her collar, smoothing a wrinkle that doesn't exist. The transformation begins not with makeup or perfume, but with silence. A slow withdrawal of laughter, replaced by composure. The evening version of themselves is calmer, brighter, a little less real. From the parlour comes the faint sound of Mrs. Pembroke greeting her guests. Her voice glides across the room like silk stretched thin. Welcome, gentlemen. Please, make yourselves at home. It's a phrase that carries the full irony of the profession. Annie leans close. You ever notice how she says it the same way every time? Clara nods. That's how prayers work too. The two step into the parlour carrying the tea tray. The room is golden, soft-edged, full of the murmur of conversation. 3 men sit comfortably on the velvet chairs, a merchant with rings that glint like small moons, an officer smelling faintly of tobacco and self-importance, and a quiet man in spectacles who might actually be kind. They rise halfway as the women enter, performing respectability as though it were contagious. Clara pours tea first for the scholar, who thanks her as though she's done him a moral favour. His hands tremble slightly when he takes the cup. You have the patience of a saint, he says. I was never patient enough to qualify, Clara replies. The officer laughs, assuming she's joking. The merchant orders more sugar. The scholar blushes. The scene unfolds like clockwork. Annie, standing beside the sideboard, meets Clara's eyes and raises one brow, the signal they share when conversation grows absurd. This one will talk about poetry soon, her look says. The next will talk about sin. Both subjects end the same way, with coins on the dresser and gratitude spoken too loudly. Mrs. Pembroke watches from the doorway, her smile soft but vigilant. She's the conductor of this orchestra, and every note must stay in tune. The women glide through their tasks, graceful and measured, their laughter spaced evenly between words. Respectability is a fragile music, easily broken by honesty. As the evening lengthens, the lamplight deepens to amber. The sound of rain begins outside, slow and deliberate. In the golden glow of the parlour, it almost feels like safety. Clara catches herself thinking that this isn't the worst kind of work. At least it pays in warmth and human voices. Then she remembers the cost, and the thought passes. When the first round of tea is done, The conversation rises and falls like breathing. The merchant tells a story about the stock exchange. The officer quotes a line of Latin he doesn't understand. The scholar listens to Clara as though listening itself were an act of redemption. It isn't, but she lets him believe. Downstairs, cook begins preparing the women's supper, a smaller, quieter meal for later. The scent of stew drifts faintly upward, unnoticed by the guests, but comforting to those who will eat it. Clara glances toward the window again. The fog outside has thickened, pressing close like a curious spectator. Inside, everything glows too brightly. She straightens her shoulders, pours another cup, and smiles with just the right amount of sincerity. The ritual continues, steady as the rain. Our quiet exploration now turns to the dance of conversation itself, the exchange of words and glances where politeness blurs into performance and every compliment hides a quiet transaction. The evening asks for polish, and the house obeys. The parlour glows with the soft authority of candlelight. The staircase gathers shadows like a velvet cloak. Somewhere, a clock announces the quarter hour with undue optimism. In this hour, preparation is everything. The performance begins long before the first knock at the door. You stand at the washstand and open the small tin of powder. It rises like a pale breath, settling over your cheeks in a veil that smells of roses and starch. A dab of rouge follows, not enough to shout, only enough to whisper that you are awake and agreeable. The mirror above the basin stares back in its cracked perfection, dividing your reflection into tidy fragments. In one panel you look composed, in another almost kind, and in the third a little worn, a truth you smooth with your fingertips until it looks like experience. Corset laces next. Annie pulls them in slow rhythm, letting each breath choose its own exit. You hold the bedpost and count to 8, a little prayer you invented when you were a seamstress. Tight, but not cruel. Firm, but not unkind. The corset is not armour, it's scaffolding for a version of yourself that earns the rent. Annie ties the final knot and pats your shoulder as if congratulating a racehorse on reaching the paddock. Mrs. Keating appears in the doorway to inspect the finish. Her gaze carries the sharpness of a ledger. Even lacing, she says, approving despite herself. Presentation begins at the spine. She retreats with a satisfied air of someone who has added a tick to a list. Annie rolls her eyes the moment she's gone, and you both smile quietly. In this house, even rebellion keeps its voice down. Hairpins, then ribbons. You coil your hair into the shape politeness prefers, a careful architecture designed to survive conversation. Annie's fingers move through your curls with neighbourly tenderness, as if tidying a garden before guests arrive. She tucks a narrow blue ribbon at the nape of your neck. It makes you look useful, she says, the good kind of useful. You adjust it until the bow sits exactly between discretion and invitation. Downstairs, the parlour becomes a stage. Lace curtains soften the windows, falling in a line that suggests modesty without promising it. The tea set shines like a chorus line, each cup turned a precise angle toward forgiveness. A cut glass decanter of sherry waits on the sideboard, amber like patient flame. You practice the pour once, twice, 3 times. A steady wrist, a quiet arc, a pause that implies choice. Mrs. Pembroke swears the right pause sells more than any smile. She is rarely wrong about commerce. French phrases are rehearsed next, the small imports of middle-class fantasy. Annie coaches you in the soft corners of bonsoir and merci, the vowels meant to feel like velvet drawn across a bruise. You can pronounce them well enough to sound educated, but not so well that anyone suspects you of being unmanageable. The house philosophy is simple. Culture on a saucer, never by the bowl. You move through the parlour, taking care with tiny mercies. Straighten the lace. Lower one lamp, lift another. You swap the artificial flowers for a fresher arrangement cook found at the market. A clutch of lilies too honest for their vases. You place them near the mantel where their perfume can pretend to be coming from money. There is a way to walk in this room, not swiftly, that suggests haste, not slowly, that invites suspicion. The step must say, "I am here because this is where good manners go after dark." You practice the distance from the hearth to the decanter until your body speaks the sentence without words. The house itself seems to inhale, preparing its voice. In the far room, Nora polishes the last of the doorknobs into small crescent moons. Cook checks the tray, adding a twist of lemon to the sherry glasses because the merchant who is due has opinions. Mrs. Keating stands at the threshold with a mild frown, as if the room were a student capable of better posture. Mrs. Pembroke arrives to inspect the arrangement. She carries a fan like a conductor's baton and gestures with it to adjust the world. "Curtains half," she says, "shadows flatter, and keep the music silent. Words will sell the evening." She steps closer to you and studies your face with professional interest. Smile less often, but when you do, let it be real. Nothing is so persuasive as a rationed kindness. You nod, absorbing the lesson into your bones. She moves to the decanter and checks your pour, the way a tailoress checks a hem. "Excellent," she murmurs. "Remember, a full glass looks desperate, an empty one looks rude. Meet virtue in the middle." She turns to the mirror and rehearses a smile of welcome that reveals nothing but teeth. The scent in the room becomes its own character. Faint powder over human, warmth, a trace of citrus, beeswax polish, and that thin thread of coal that London adds to every composition. It smells like an honest attempt to be better than one's circumstances. You take your place by the tea tray as Annie positions herself near the sherry. Between you is the social bridge the house sells, comfort by cup and comfort by glass, both flavoured with a promise that nothing surprising will happen. This is not the theatre of seduction. It is the theatre of reassurance. Even sin wears manners when guests arrive. Practice talk follows. You and Annie take turns asking each other polite questions in the tones you'll use later. Are you reading anything at present? Is the rain good for the gardens? Have you seen the latest exhibition? The questions are not meant to discover truth. They are meant to give man a place to set down his dignity while he takes off his hat. A faint knock at the back stairs. Cook's whisper floats in, light as steam. The officer is delayed, the merchant is early, the scholar is uncertain. You exchange a look with Annie that translates this into work. More sherry for the merchant, more listening for the scholar, and a late entrance for the uniform that believes it has the lead roll. Mrs. Pembroke circles the room one final time, tightening the evening like a corset. "Ladies," she says, "we are to be generous with patience and sparing with candour. The city intends to enjoy itself and remain innocent. We will assist." She clasps her hands with a serenity that looks almost religious. "Remember, we are not selling ourselves. We are selling relief." You step to the window and pull the curtains to the exact point where the street becomes suggestion. The fog outside presses back like a curious audience. Lamps burn as little suns along the pavement. In their glow, the rain turns to gold thread and stitches the city together. Footsteps sound on the front steps. They are measured, confident, accustomed to welcome. You inhale powder, lemon, wax, coal. Your own pulse adds a quick note of honesty under the music. Annie touches your wrist, a small blessing shared between workers on the cusp of the shift. The bell rings, a single, polite chime, neither shy nor bold. Mrs. Pembroke glides to the door. You take your place by the tray. Annie takes hers by the sideboard. The room holds its breath without trembling. If we listen closely, the next part arrives on its own. You'll meet the first gentleman of the evening, courteous, lonely, and painstakingly civilized. The kind of man who mistakes conversation for absolution and gratitude for love. The door opens with the kind of hush that money buys. The hinges never creak here. They're oiled weakly, like manners. A man steps in, shaking rain from his coat with careful restraint. His boots gleam, his moustache is trimmed, and his politeness could be measured in teaspoons. Mrs. Pembroke greets him by name, Mr. Harland, and ushers him toward the parlour as if he were visiting family. If virtue had a scent, it would smell exactly like the cologne he wears, lavender and faint anxiety. He bows not deeply enough to disturb hierarchy and murmurs, "A pleasure, as always." His tone suggests the world has disappointed him, and he has come here to be reassured it still knows how to behave. Mrs. Pembroke accepts his hat with the grace of a queen receiving tribute. "You must be chilled," she says. "We keep a warm house." It's not a boast, just a fact of survival. Clara moves forward with the tea tray, every motion measured. The sound of the cup meeting the saucer is soft, deliberate, like punctuation in a polite letter. Mr. Harland thanks her as though she has performed a small miracle. "You have the touch of a professional," he says. She smiles faintly. "Practice makes propriety, sir." He chuckles, unsure whether she's teasing him, and chooses to believe she isn't. Annie pours the sherry, her movements brisk but graceful. Mrs. Pembroke supervises the moment until the glass is set down safely. Then, with a glance at the clock, she withdraws to her office under the pretense of paperwork. It's her favourite kind of privacy, the kind that earns interest. The rain outside has thickened, tracing slow rivers down the window. The parlour glows amber, safe and self-satisfied. The conversation begins the way all respectable transactions do, with weather. "Dreadful rain," Mr. Harland says. "It's London's favourite pastime," Clara replies. "The city enjoys washing itself of intentions." He smiles, relaxing into his chair. "And do you enjoy the city, Miss Clara?" "I enjoy observing it," she says, "from a distance. It behaves better when you watch." He laughs softly, the sound of a man pleased to be amused without feeling mocked. The conversation moves to the topic of art, a subject safe for everyone and meaningful to no one. He speaks of a new exhibition in Piccadilly, landscapes mostly, trees and sky arranged in moral order. "They calm the mind," he says. "One forgets the crowds, the smoke." "Do you ever paint?" she asks. "Good heavens, no. I haven't the temperament for patience." "Then you'd make an excellent critic," she says, eyes lowered, tone perfectly even. Her small jokes keep the rhythm easy. He laughs, and the air warms. The scene feels like a business meeting pretending to be romance. Clara knows this dance well, a slow waltz of civility in which both partners pretend not to notice the choreography. He leans forward slightly, elbows on knees, the stance of a man about to confess something trivial and call it profound. "You seem very, what's the word, composed. Most ladies are more forward." Clara pours him another cup of tea. "Composition comes with practice. I find calm more reliable than excitement." He nods, as though she said something wise. "That's admirable. My wife, bless her, finds calm unbearable." "Many do," Clara says. "Peace has a way of making people aware of themselves." A flicker of something passes across his face. Guilt, or maybe recognition. He changes the subject quickly. "You read, don't you?" "When there's light enough," she answers. "And what sort of books?" "Ones that end before everyone dies of manners." He laughs again, this time sincerely. "You're very direct." It's the only honesty the world still tolerates. The clock ticks on the mantel, counting time like an accountant. Every sound in the room feels rehearsed. The clink of the spoon, the rain against glass, the slight crackle of fire. The illusion works because both believe in it for their own reasons. He believes he's being human. She believes she's being paid to let him forget otherwise. He begins to talk about his work, shipping, numbers, the polite monotony of empire. He speaks with the quiet pride of someone who mistakes quantity for purpose. Clara listens, nodding at the right intervals, offering small remarks that make him feel exceptional. Her detachment is professional, not cruel. Sympathy, after all, is cheaper than truth. He asks her opinion about trade routes, as though testing whether she knows the correct answer. She replies with precision, "Where there's demand, there's a moral defence. The Empire will always find justification at the bottom of a teacup." He laughs, but it's nervous now. She has spoken a little too clearly. "You should write," he says, recovering himself. "You have ideas." "Only recycled ones," she says. "London runs on them." A pause follows, comfortable for her, slightly alarming for him. He studies her face as though trying to remember whether he came for conversation or for quiet. Eventually he decides on both. "You must think very little of us," he says softly. "Not at all," she replies. "Someone has to keep the world turning, and it may as well be the disillusioned." Her tone is gentle, not mocking. He looks at her for a long time, then smiles, the kind of smile people wear when they've been gently forgiven without asking. He finishes his tea in silence. When he rises to leave, he stands by the mantel, unsure what parting gesture suits the situation. Shaking hands seems absurd, bowing too theatrical. He settles on words. "You're very kind," he says. "I'm very consistent," she corrects him. He reaches into his pocket, produces a coin, and places it discreetly on the table beside the sugar bowl. Not payment exactly, an apology that jingles. "For your time," he murmurs. "Time's my profession," she says. "You just rented the conversation." He laughs once more, genuinely this time, and retrieves his hat. "Until next week," he says. "Until the weather improves," she answers. When the door closes behind him, the silence that follows feels softer than exhaustion, heavier than peace. Annie reappears from the sideboard where she's been refilling glasses and pretending invisibility. "That one," she says, "could apologise for breathing." Clara smiles faintly. At least he'd mean it. They gather the cups, restoring the parlour to its original innocence. The fire burns low, the candles gutter slightly. Mrs. Pembroke re-enters, her expression neutral and satisfied. "Well?" she asks. "Harmless," Clara replies. "Polite, punctual, and moderately remorseful." "The ideal guest," Mrs. Pembroke says. "Never underestimate the paying power of guilt." She adjusts a candle and glances toward the clock. "The others will arrive soon. You've set the tone. Keep it civilized." Then she disappears again, the sound of her footsteps fading like the last note of a waltz. Clara takes a seat by the window, teacup still warm in her hands. The rain outside has become steady, patient. It taps against the glass with the rhythm of thought. In its reflection, she sees her own face, powdered, composed, faintly unreal. Respectability, she thinks, is a costume stitched from good lighting and practiced restraint. The fog thickens, blurring the lamps into halos. Somewhere down the street, laughter bursts from a passing carriage and vanishes into the night. The city keeps its secrets, and so does she. The story doesn't end here, it simply changes its tone. The night will gather speed. More guests, more laughter, more performance, and the polite theatre of commerce will unfold until exhaustion replaces applause. The evening stretches forward like a polite procession. One man leaves, another arrives, each carrying a version of charm tailored for temporary comfort. The rain outside has settled into rhythm. Inside, the house performs its own. Candles tremble slightly in their brass holders, the shadows on the walls changing partners as the night advances. The first to arrive after Mr. Harland is Mr. Fairchild, talkative, perfumed, and wrapped in the self-confidence of a man whose fortune began with his father's handwriting. He sweeps into the parlour with the energy of a lecturer and the focus of a child in a mirror shop. His coat, navy with silver buttons, catches the light as if determined to participate in the conversation. "Good evening, ladies," he says, drawing out the greeting until it sounds rehearsed. "I do hope I'm not intruding on prayer." "Not at all," says Mrs. Pembroke, her smile carved with professional serenity. We rarely trouble heaven after supper." He laughs too loudly, mistaking the remark for flattery. Clara stands ready with the tea tray, her expression polite enough to pass for admiration. Annie prepares the sherry. Mrs. Keating, stationed near the door, ensures nothing exceeds the boundary of decency, at least not publicly. Mr. Fairchild sits with the confidence of someone auditioning for approval. "Have you heard?" he begins. "They plan to build a railway under the Thames? Utter madness. People will drown in schedules." Clara pours the tea, eyes lowered. "It's a clever idea," she says. "London's dreams have always been underground." He looks at her, uncertain whether to be impressed. "My dear, that's quite poetic." "I blame the weather," she replies, steady and mild. He spends the next 15 minutes explaining trade, politics, and the moral decay of the theatre. His voice fills the room like incense, expensive, unnecessary, slightly suffocating. Every few sentences he pauses for validation, and the women supply it with well-timed smiles. Mrs. Pembroke nods at all the right moments, as though agreement were a renewable resource. "London," he concludes, "is a city of vice wrapped in velvet." Clara offers the faintest smile. Velvet wears thin. His laughter is brief but genuine. He rises, checks his pocket watch, and leaves with the satisfied air of a man who's contributed wisdom to the world. The sound of his boots fades down the hallway, and the house exhales in quiet unison. 2 down, Annie whispers, straightening the decanter. 3 to go, if the fog doesn't scare them off. The fog scares no one, Clara says. It hides too much truth to be frightening. Moments later, the next visitor arrives. Thomas Lee, young, shy, clean to the point of apology. He removes his hat and nearly drops it, then apologizes for almost apologizing. His voice trembles on every word, as though he's confessing crimes to the furniture. "Good evening, ma'am," he says to Mrs. Pembroke, who answers with gentle precision. "Good evening, sir. Do come in before your nerves catch cold." He sits near the fire, clasping his hands together like a penitent. The flames throw light across his pale face, and for a moment he looks like a figure in a religious painting misplaced by accident. Annie brings tea. Clara, curious, takes a seat opposite. "You're quiet tonight," she says softly. I prefer listening," he stammers. "Talking feels dangerous." "Then you've chosen the safest room in London," she replies. He blushes and looks down. Conversation trickles slowly like rain through gutters, awkward, steady, honest by accident. He asks about her day, her reading, her opinions on music. When he compliments her patience, she thanks him without irony. It feels almost like rest. After half an hour, he stands abruptly. "I should go," he says. "If I stay longer, I'll think too well of myself." "Then you've already improved," Clara answers, rising with him. He leaves a coin on the mantel, the smallest one possible, polished by indecision. When the door closes, Annie lets out a sigh that sounds almost fond. "He'll apologise to the moon on his way home," Clara nods. "At least the moon listens for free." The last group arrives together, 3 men from a nearby club, soaked with rain and good cheer. They stumble in like a misplaced parade, loud with confidence and the sort of laughter that never waits for permission. Their coats smell of tobacco, gin, and the river. Mrs. Pembroke greets them with impeccable calm, though her smile tightens at the edges. "Gentlemen," she says, "the city thanks you for your enthusiasm. Please tread lightly, the furniture bruises easily." They laugh, half understanding, and remove their hats. One of them requests sherry before even finding a seat. Another compliments the curtains so earnestly that everyone looks at them just to avoid replying. The third, already drowsy, sinks into a chair and begins recounting a story about losing a wager over a pigeon race. Clara and Annie move between them like practiced dancers, refilling glasses, answering questions, steering conversation away from disaster. The room fills with layers of scent, wet wool, cigar smoke, and the sweet bite of fortified wine. It's chaos disguised as merriment, and Mrs. Pembroke manages it with military grace. At one point, one of the men, a captain, judging by the braid on his sleeve, leans too close to Clara. His breath smells of citrus and impatience. "You're far too clever for this place," he says, as though granting absolution. She smiles faintly. "I've noticed cleverness is tolerated best in moderation." He blinks, unsure if he's been complimented, then laughs because it's easier than thinking. Across the room, Annie keeps a drunkard from toppling a candle, while Mrs. Keating discreetly collects empty glasses. Cook from the doorway surveys the scene with grim affection. "The Empire in miniature," she mutters. "All noise, no trousers." The hours pass in fragments, a burst of laughter, a dropped spoon, the soft thud of rain on the windows. Each client leaves with the same line. "A delightful evening, my dear," and the same expression of weary satisfaction. The coins they leave behind make the same small sound when placed in the ledger drawer. By midnight, only the scent remains, a blend of smoke, perfume, and polite exhaustion. The candles burn low, trembling as if embarrassed by their own persistence. Clara stands by the window again, watching the rain. The glass glistens with thin rivers, each one catching the reflection of the fading fire. She imagines the men returning to their homes, their coats steaming dry before wives who will never ask where the perfume came from. Annie joins her, carrying the empty tray. "You switch accents without thinking," she says. "You were nearly Irish for one of them." "It keeps them comfortable," Clara says. "Everyone prefers to hear what they already believe." "And what do you believe?" "That the rain belongs to everyone," she says. "It's the only thing that doesn't charge admission." They share a small smile. Outside, a carriage rattles past, its wheels slicing puddles into gold under the lamplight. The fog returns, thicker now, folding the street into silence. Upstairs, Mrs. Pembroke locks the money drawer. Downstairs, Cook douses the last of the lamps. The house sighs like a tired actress behind the curtain. If we keep listening, even softly, the next truth reveals itself. The night will turn inward. Coins counted, ledgers written, and the quiet arithmetic of survival, measured in clean sheets and unpaid dreams. By the time the last carriage wheel fades into the fog, the house has returned to its second form, the one made of numbers. The laughter is gone, the glasses are empty, and politeness has been reduced to arithmetic. In the parlour, the fire burns low, throwing light across a scatter of silver coins on the table. They shine briefly before dulling again, like applause that forgets why it started. Mrs. Pembroke sits at the table with her ledger open, her pen poised like a small weapon. The room smells of paper, ink, and faint perfume, the scent of bureaucracy disguised as gentility. Annie and Clara stand nearby, waiting to receive their evening's count. This part of the night is less about gratitude and more about gravity. Even the clock seems to tick with financial precision. "Let's see," says Mrs. Pembroke, scanning her notes. "Mr. Fairchild was generous, as usual. The club men, well, we'll call their behaviour enthusiastic rather than profitable." She writes a figure beside each name, the ink bleeding faintly into the paper, as if unwilling to record the truth too sharply. Deductions for laundry, candles, and refreshments. The doctor's fee to be set aside, of course. Clara knows what that means. For every 10 coins that pass through her hands, 4 belong to the house, 1 to the doctor who visits whether invited or not, another to the constable who forgets to patrol the street, and the rest to survival. Respectability, she thinks, is the most expensive thing a woman can rent. Mrs. Keating arrives with the linens from upstairs, folded and spotless. "All changed," she reports. "Not a stain to be seen." "Good," says Mrs. Pembroke. "Clean sheets, clean conscience." Annie murmurs, "The conscience costs more to launder." Mrs. Pembroke pretends not to hear, though the corner of her mouth twitches. The pile of money on the table is small, but it carries the weight of another day survived. Clara watches as Mrs. Pembroke counts each coin aloud. The rhythm slow and certain. The sound is hypnotic. The click of metal against wood, the rustle of calculation. Coins are the only applause anyone gets here. When it's over, Mrs. Pembroke divides the earnings. 2 coins for Annie, 3 for Clara, 1 for Nora, a few more for the house. The rest she sweeps neatly into a small envelope labelled maintenance. Maintenance, Clara thinks, is a generous word. It covers everything from bribery to broken teacups. Be sure to thank the doctor when he returns next. Weak, Mrs. Pembroke says. He's quite understanding with his fees. Yes, ma'am, Clara replies, because there is no correct response to absurdity spoken politely. The women disperse. Annie heads to the kitchen to wash cups. Nora carries the clean linens upstairs. Clara remains a moment longer, her eyes on the ledger. The pages are smudged at the edges from fingers that tremble slightly. She imagines her own life recorded like that, ink blurring where it refuses to dry. In the kitchen, cook has left a plate of bread and leftover stew under a towel. Clara eats slowly, standing near the open window where the air smells of wet iron and street smoke. The stew is thin but warm. Hunger, she decides, is more manageable than most emotions. At least it tells the truth. Annie joins her, wiping her hands on her apron. Did she short us again? By a coin, maybe 2, Clara says. Annie shrugs. It's her house, her math. Math, Clara repeats, smiling faintly. The most creative art form in London. They share quiet laughter. The room feels smaller now that the guests are gone, but somehow safer. The glamour has drained away, leaving behind honest fatigue. Above them, the floorboards creak as Mrs. Pembroke moves toward her room. The sound carries authority even in retreat. Annie pulls a coin from her pocket and lays it on the table. Look at it. A man's smile shrunk to metal. Better than a sermon, Clara says. At least it's useful. What will you do with yours? Buy something frivolous, a ribbon maybe, or a tart from the bakery. I like pretending I have choices. Annie nods. Freedom in crumbs. Exactly, Clara says. Delicious crumbs. Later, when the kitchen quiets, Clara slips on her shawl and steps outside to the narrow back alley. The rain has softened into drizzle, the kind that turns cobblestones into tiny mirrors. She walks to the corner shop that stays open late, its windows glowing faintly. The baker, half asleep, sells her a small strawberry tart for a single coin. It's smaller than her palm, glazed to perfection, the sort of sweetness that feels like rebellion. She eats it slowly on the walk back, the taste vivid against the fog. Each bite is a small reminder that pleasure still exists, even when rationed. It's not the flavour that matters, but the defiance. Sugar as survival, dessert as dignity. When she finishes, she licks her fingers clean and laughs quietly at the absurdity of feeling rich over something so small. Back at the house, the parlour is dark. Only the embers in the fireplace remain, red as half-forgotten memory. She sets her shawl to dry near the hearth and looks around the empty room. By candlelight, it almost seems beautiful again. Polished wood, soft curtains, order restored. But she knows better. Every polished surface here has a price. Upstairs, she can hear Annie moving about. The soft thud of footsteps, the rustle of cloth. Then, another sound, a door closing sharply, followed by silence. It's the kind of silence that feels wrong, like a thought interrupted. Clara climbs the stairs slowly, candle in hand. She finds Annie sitting on the edge of her bed, one eye already swelling dark. A client from earlier, she says quietly. He followed me out. Thought I'd forgotten to thank him properly. Her voice is calm, but her hands tremble. Clara sets the candle down and sits beside her. Did Mrs. Pembroke see? She saw. She said he's a regular. We can't afford to offend him. They sit in silence for a moment. Outside, thunder grumbles low over the rooftops, the kind that never quite becomes a storm. Clara takes a clean cloth from the washstand, dips it in cool water, and presses it gently to Annie's eye. You're lucky he didn't break anything else, she says softly. "I suppose I am," Annie murmurs. "That's how we measure luck now?" Clara nods. "Apparently." Annie laughs once without humour. "At least the sheets are clean." "They're always clean," Clara says. "It's everything else that stains." They stay that way for a while, saying nothing. The thunder fades, replaced by the steady tap of rain against the window. The candle burns low, its flame small but stubborn. It flickers over their faces, softening every edge. Mrs. Pembroke passes in the hallway, her footsteps brisk, her expression unreadable. She pauses by the open door and says, "You'll be paid for tomorrow as usual. Try not to bruise where it shows." Then she walks on, leaving a faint trail of perfume and policy behind her. Annie leans back on the bed, eyes closed. "Do you ever wish the city would just stop moving?" "All the time," Clara says, "but it won't. It's too well trained." She wrings out the cloth and folds it neatly beside the basin. The candle sputters once, then steadies again. Clean sheets, she thinks, fresh water and another day intact. The city will wake soon enough, but for now, exhaustion is permission to rest. Somewhere between breath and memory, the story continues. It will lead us through the fragile peace that follows hurt, the small acts of care and quiet loyalty that hold the house together when the world outside offers none. The house is quieter than usual the next morning. The storm has left puddles across the yard that mirror the sky, each one a small patch of grey pretending to be infinite. Inside, everything smells of damp fabric and cooling ash. Mrs. Pembroke has not yet appeared. Perhaps she's waiting for the world to seem respectable again before she joins it. Clara sits at the kitchen table mending a torn cuff. Her stitches are even, practiced, patient, the rhythm of someone who repairs what she cannot replace. Annie moves slowly about the room, one eye shadowed by last night's bruise. She hums softly while pouring tea, a melody that turns the air less heavy. Nora hurries between them with a towel, polishing the handles on the teapot until her reflection trembles in silver. "You shouldn't be up," Clara says gently. Annie shrugs, the motion small. "If I lie down, I'll dream about him. Standing keeps me awake." "You should still rest." "I'll rest when I'm someone else," Annie replies, and for a moment they both smile, the sort of smile that holds back a sigh. Cook enters carrying a tray of bread and butter, the morning ration. "You two look like ghosts rehearsing manners," she says, setting it down. "Eat something before Mrs. Keating invents a rule about fasting for modesty." They eat quietly. The bread is rough but warm, the butter thin but fragrant. For a while, no one speaks. The kettle hisses softly, the fire pops, and the world holds still just long enough for everyone to remember how silence feels when it isn't punishment. After breakfast, Mrs. Keating arrives, her ledger clutched like a holy text. She glances at Annie's face and frowns. "Accidents are inconvenient," she says, not unkindly but without sympathy. "Best cover it with powder when the doctor returns. We can't risk questions." Annie nods. "I'll say I fell on the stairs." "Make it sound graceful," Mrs. Keating says, then moves on, her heels tapping authority down the hall. When she's gone, Cook mutters, "If falling downstairs paid better, half of London would be honest." Clara laughs quietly, and even Annie's lips twitch upward. Humour, thin as thread, still holds. Later, the two women retreat to Clara's room, where the light is kind and the window small. Annie lies back on the bed, eyes closed, while Clara mixes a cool compress. The water in the basin is cloudy with soap and patience. She wrings the cloth gently and presses it against Annie's bruise. The skin is warm under her fingers. "It'll fade," Clara says softly. "So will we," Annie murmurs, not sadly, just stating fact. "Then we'll fade together," Clara says. They sit in silence for a while, the air thick with the scent of wet linen and rose powder. Outside, a piano plays faintly from a nearby tavern, a melody cheerful enough to be dishonest. Annie opens her eyes. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Sometimes, Clara says. But then I remember the world isn't built for women who leave. It's built for women who endure. Annie nods. Enduring is easier when someone's beside you. The sound of rain starts again, softer now. A gentle drizzle stitching itself into the day. Clara dips the cloth once more. Careful, precise. Annie winces slightly but doesn't move. You're kind, she says after a while. You shouldn't be. Kindness goes out of fashion in places like this. Then we'll bring it back, Clara says. We'll make it look fashionable. Annie laughs and the sound lightens the room. Imagine that. Kindness as the newest trend. We'd all be bankrupt. Not all, Clara says. Mrs. Pembroke would find a way to charge rent for it. Their laughter fades into a quiet sigh of relief. For a moment, the house feels safe. Not because it is, but because they decide to believe it might be. Safety, they've learned, isn't a location. It's a temporary agreement between fear and fatigue. By afternoon, the fog thickens again, pressing against the window like an uninvited thought. Mrs. Pembroke gathers everyone in the parlour. Her tone is brisk, efficient, pretending not to notice the bruise on Annie's face. Ladies, she begins, there are rumours circulating in the papers, accusations against establishments like ours. They call us disease spreaders, a threat to public morality, as if virtue were a contagious condition. She pauses, tapping her fan against her palm. We'll continue as usual. The gentlemen who visit here know the difference between rumour and reality. Still, if anyone asks, you're to say this is a boarding house for respectable women of limited means, Cook mutters. Limited means unlimited irony. Mrs. Pembroke ignores her. We are not to invite trouble. The police protect no one, and the reformers think salvation comes with signatures. Clara exchanges a glance with Annie. Both know what those reformers mean. The ladies' rescue homes, places that promise redemption but deliver confinement. Everyone has heard the stories. Women taken in for their own good, stripped of names, dressed in grey and set to laundering sheets for eternity. They say it's charity, Annie whispers, but it sounds like prison with better curtains, Clara nods. A rescue that starts with a lock rarely ends with liberty. Mrs. Pembroke finishes her address and dismisses them. The women drift back to their rooms, carrying a mixture of fear and resignation like a shared perfume. Clara and Annie linger in the hallway, speaking in low voices. Would you ever go, Annie asks, to a rescue home? Clara shakes her head. I'd rather drown free than prey on command. Annie smiles faintly. I'd rather not drown at all. They return to the kitchen where Cook is stirring soup with unnecessary vigour. You two look like you're planning a revolution, she says. Only the quiet kind, Clara answers. We'll start by keeping each other alive. Good start, Cook says, ladling out bowls. The rest of the city hasn't managed that much. They eat together, the soup thin but warming. Nora joins them halfway through, still smelling faintly of soap and effort. The piano man's playing again, she says. Sounds like he's got a new song. What's it called? Annie asks. Something about love, Nora says. They all are. Clara listens for a moment, the faint tune drifting through the fog. It's clumsy, sentimental, but it makes her smile. Love, she says, is London's best. Fiction. Do you believe in it? Nora asks. I believe in company, Clara says. That's close enough. The candle on the table burns low, haloed by smoke. The sound of the piano fades, replaced by the rumble of a carriage in the street. The women finish their meal and sit for a moment longer, reluctant to return to their separate rooms. Each knows the comfort will vanish as soon as the door closes, so they stay together until silence feels companionable again. Later, as the lamps are extinguished one by one, Clara and Annie climb the stairs side by side. Their footsteps fall in perfect rhythm, two soft notes in the same weary song. At the landing they pause. Sleep well, Clara says. You too, Annie replies. If you dream, make it somewhere warm. Clara nods. The corridor smells of wax and powder, of things pretending to be permanent. As she closes her door, she listens to the rain against the window and feels the faint pulse of life continuing in the rooms around her. Fragile, steady, human. If we open the curtain just a little more, the next scene begins. We'll meet another visitor, not a regular customer, but one of those strange souls who arrive wrapped in virtue, convinced they can buy forgiveness without paying attention to the cost. By the time the lamps are lit again the following night, the city has returned to its usual hypocrisy, pious by day, hungry by dusk. The rain has stopped, but the air still tastes of soot and repentance. Mrs. Pembroke polishes the brass at the door until it gleams like opportunity. First impressions, she says, make morality look affordable. She's right as always. Tonight's first impression will arrive wearing nervous shoes. The carriage pulls up precisely at 7. The man who steps out is younger than expected. Late 20s, tall, with the posture of someone accustomed to being watched. His coat is plain but pressed, and his hair glistens from overzealous grooming. He introduces himself as Mr. Tully, though the name sounds borrowed, like a disguise purchased for the evening. His handshake is quick, careful, and slightly damp. Mrs. Pembroke welcomes him with perfect composure. "A friend of the Reverend, yes? We're honoured. Please come in before the street starts gossiping." She leads him to the parlour where the fire crackles as though trying to appear cheerful. The man sits on the edge of the velvet chair, hat in his lap, guilt in his posture. Clara enters quietly with the tea tray. She recognises the type immediately. Moral upbringing wrapped around curiosity. The dangerous kind of innocence, the one that wants to be convinced corruption is educational. She sets the tray down and says softly, "Tea or sherry, sir?" "Tea, please," he says, as though choosing the safer sin. Mrs. Pembroke excuses herself, leaving them in the calm glow of the fire. Clara pours the tea. The sound of liquid meeting porcelain fills the silence. He watches the cup as if it contains temptation itself. "You seem thoughtful," she says. "I shouldn't be here," he answers. "Then you're in good company," she says. He glances up, surprised. She keeps her voice even, her tone practical. Most people arrive saying that. It's the standard confession. The house forgives quickly. It has to for business reasons. He laughs nervously. "You're very direct." "It saves time," she says, handing him the cup. "And time is the only thing we sell that doesn't return." He takes a sip, careful not to spill. "I'm told you're educated?" "Only in survival," she replies. "It's a rigorous curriculum." He smiles faintly, then frowns. "My uncle, the Reverend, says women like you lead men astray." "Men," she says, stirring her own cup, "seem to have excellent maps. They rarely get lost without wanting to." He blushes, eyes dropping to the table. "You shouldn't make light of sin." "I make light of everything," she says. "It helps me see." A silence follows, long enough for the fire to change its mind about burning. When he speaks again, his voice has softened. "I suppose the city isn't kind to women." "It isn't kind to anyone," she says, "but it charges us differently. That's unfair." "Unfair," she says, "is the foundation of civilization. Without it, half of London would lose their purpose." He sets down his cup, half finished. "You speak like a preacher yourself." "Experience," she says. "Same material, different pulpit." He laughs again, though his eyes glisten slightly. There's a tremor in his voice when he says, "I thought coming here would make me feel wicked. Instead I feel human." "Don't apologise," she says. "Most people are human by accident." For a moment he looks at her as if seeing something unexpected. Not desire exactly, recognition. It's the look people give mirrors when they notice the same fatigue looking back. "You're very kind," he says quietly. "I'm very consistent," she replies. He shakes his head. "You deserve better." "Better," she says, is a comparative illusion. Everyone's better than someone, worse than someone else. The trick is not to meet either of them. He laughs despite himself, rubbing his forehead. You make sin sound reasonable. Sin, she says, is just what happens when pleasure arrives before permission. The room feels warmer now, not from the fire but from shared honesty. It's not intimacy. Something smaller, safer. Two people temporarily unmasked. He leans back, more at ease. Do you ever regret this life? Only on Mondays, she says, and sometimes on Sundays when everyone else is pretending they don't. He smiles. You'd be a dangerous parishioner. I'd be the first to tithe irony, she says. He finishes his tea and sets the cup down, gently. I suppose I should go before I start making excuses to myself. That's wise, she says. Excuses are contagious. He stands, hesitates, then reaches for his pocket. May I? Yes, she says. He places 2 coins on the table, more than the usual fee. For your time, he murmurs. Time again, she says softly. It's our most popular product. He bows slightly, hat in hand. You've given me much to think about. Thinking, she says, is the least expensive pleasure. Enjoy it while it lasts. When he leaves, the room seems suddenly quieter. The fire sighs and settles. Annie slips in through the doorway, her hair still damp from washing dishes. Was he one of the kind ones, she asks. Clara nods. Kind, confused, overeducated, the usual combination. Annie grins. The Reverend's nephew, isn't he? Yes. He'll donate twice to charity next week to balance the books. That's religion for you, Annie says. A long receipt for human weakness. They tidy the room together in silence. The scent of tea and faint tobacco still lingers, wrapped in the heavier perfume of the house. Annie straightens the chairs. Clara wipes the edge of the table where condensation has left a ring. Each task is a small spell against fatigue. When everything's in order, Clara turns to the mirror above the mantel. The candlelight trembles across the glass, her reflection half hidden by smoke. She wipes the surface with her sleeve, slow and deliberate. The face that looks back is calm, practiced, faintly amused. Behind her, Annie's reflection joins her. 2 women framed in flickering light, witnesses to each other's persistence. Do you ever wonder, Annie says, if they see us as people or parables? Both, Clara says. Depends which helps them sleep. And which are we? The background, Clara says, but at least it's well lit. Outside, the fog gathers again, dense and forgiving. From somewhere down the street, a church bell tolls. Not in condemnation, just routine. The sound rolls through the city, touching rooftops, chimneys, and every secret between them. It reaches the house and fades, leaving only the echo of its certainty. Clara leans on the windowsill, watching the street lamps burn like patient stars. He paid double, she says softly, perhaps for absolution. Annie closes the shutters. Then we should sleep easy. Forgiveness has been financed. They laugh quietly, and the night folds itself back into calm. The fire dwindles, the tea cools, and the house begins its slow descent into silence once more. The night doesn't end, it only changes its kind of honesty. The calm will be broken again, not by guilt or rain this time, but by authority knocking at the wrong door, asking the right questions for all the wrong reasons. It begins with footsteps in the fog, slow, deliberate, and too confident to belong to a customer. The hour is late, the lamps half spent, and the house has already begun its nightly retreat toward quiet. Mrs. Pembroke has retired upstairs, ledger balanced and conscience tidy. Cook has banked the fire, humming her usual hymn to exhaustion. Clara and Annie sit in the kitchen, sharing a final cup of tea that tastes faintly of smoke and routine. Then comes the knock, not the hesitant tap of a gentleman seeking discretion, but the firm, official rhythm of someone paid to interrupt. 3 knocks, spaced evenly, followed by silence heavy enough to have its own presence. Annie looks up. That isn't good, she says softly. Clara nods. Nothing polite knocks like that. Mrs. Keating appears almost immediately as if summoned by dread. Her grey hair is pinned too tightly, her expression tighter still. "Stay where you are," she whispers. "Let Mrs. Pembroke speak first." She straightens her collar and disappears into the hallway. The front door opens. A voice carries through the house. Deep, clipped, practiced. "Inspector Ward, Metropolitan Police. We've received reports of indecent operations at this address." His tone makes the words sound like mathematics. Precise, impersonal, already solved. Mrs. Pembroke's reply glides upward, smooth as silk drawn over steel. "Inspector, I assure you this is a respectable boarding house. We have guests, not operations." The sound of paper rustling. "Then you won't mind if we confirm," he says. "No need," Mrs. Pembroke replies quickly. "We pride ourselves on propriety." Propriety, Clara thinks, is about to cost extra. From the kitchen doorway, she and Annie exchange glances. Annie whispers, "Do you think he's really a policeman?" "If he isn't, he's wasted his talent for authority," Clara murmurs. Heavy boots step into the parlour. The smell of damp wool follows, mingling with the last traces of sherry and polish. Inspector Ward's voice carries the weight of bureaucracy. "We'll take a look around. It's routine." Routine. The word London uses when it plans to pretend fairness. Mrs. Pembroke, sounding every inch the lady she's worked to impersonate, says, "Of course, Inspector. May I offer you tea while you perform your routine?" The pause that follows is short but decisive. "Tea," he repeats, softening slightly. "That would be acceptable." Annie whispers, "She's buying time." "Time's the most valuable thing in the house," Clara replies. They hear chairs scrape, cups clink. Mrs. Pembroke's calm fills the air like perfume. "Sugar, Inspector?" "Just one lump." "Good choice. Sweetness ruins strong tea." The exchange sounds civil, even friendly, but underneath it runs the quiet strain of danger. Every polite phrase is a chess move, every smile a disguise. The inspector clears his throat. "There are complaints, ma'am. Neighbours have seen men entering at odd hours. You understand the concern?" Mrs. Pembroke's voice doesn't tremble. "Men, in London, at odd hours. How shocking." Clara can almost hear him blink. She hides her smile in her sleeve. Still, he presses on. "We've been asked to ensure this establishment isn't what the papers call a disorderly house." "Oh, we are very orderly," Mrs. Pembroke says. "We have rules, ledgers, even dusting schedules. Would you like to see?" Annie bites her lip to keep from laughing. The sound of the ledger opening carries through the walls. Pages turning, pens scratching. Clara imagines the inspector staring down at columns of rent and expenses, all written with the moral precision of arithmetic. "Your records appear thorough," he admits. "I find order soothe the conscience," Mrs. Pembroke says lightly. "Perhaps your superiors feel the same." There's a pause. Another paper rustles. Then Mrs. Pembroke's voice drops slightly, almost musical. "Inspector, we both serve the same city. It values discretion as much as diligence." A soft clink follows, the discreet sound of coins meeting conviction. A polite cough from the inspector. "I see. Well, everything appears in order. I'll just take your name for my report." Mrs. Pembroke spells it carefully, each letter like a curtain closing on the scene. From the kitchen doorway, Annie whispers, "Morality, it seems, is negotiable." "In small denominations," Clara adds. The inspector lingers long enough to finish his tea. He compliments the cleanliness, the furniture, the fine example of womanly enterprise. Then he leaves, boots echoing down the steps, his silhouette swallowed by fog. Mrs. Pembroke doesn't move until the sound of the carriage fades. Then she exhales and sets down the empty teacup. "Ladies," she calls, her voice carrying through the house, "we have survived another audit." Annie claps once softly. "Should we record it in the ledger under miracles?" "Under maintenance," Clara says. "It fits the pattern." When they gather in the parlour, Mrs. Pembroke looks more relieved than angry. He won't return soon, she says. London's virtue has many addresses, will not be his favourite. Mrs. Keating nods, already calculating the bribe into next month's expenses. I'll list it as window repairs, she says. Excellent, Mrs. Pembroke replies. After all, integrity is good business. Cook appears with the kettle, pouring what remains of the hot water into cups. To integrity, she says, raising hers. To discretion, Annie adds. To our ongoing employment, Clara finishes. They drink like soldiers after battle, weary, victorious, uncelebrated. Outside, the fog thickens, pressing against the window, until the world beyond seems entirely theoretical. The rain begins again, not enough to cleanse, just enough to remind. Clara sits by the hearth, the warmth barely reaching her fingers. Annie settles beside her, wrapping a shawl around both their shoulders. Do you think he believed her? Belief is overrated, Clara says. He just needed to feel satisfied. Annie sighs. Then everyone got what they came for. Exactly, Clara says. Commerce in its purest form. The clock strikes midnight, its tone mild, almost embarrassed. Mrs. Pembroke closes her ledger, extinguishes one lamp and announces, "Order restored. Let's keep it that way." The house obeys. One by one, doors close. The last embers fade into ash. Only the faint scent of tea and damp wool remains. The perfume of near disasters averted by etiquette. Clara stays awake a little longer, tracing the pattern of raindrops on the window pane. The fog outside shifts like a curtain, revealing a sliver of moon. Its light falls across the room, silvering the corners, making the parlour look almost holy. She laughs softly under her breath. "Forgive us," she murmurs, "for keeping the city clean in all the wrong ways." Annie, half asleep beside her, mumbles, "If there's forgiveness for that, it should come with breakfast." "Then we'll be saints by morning," Clara says. Outside, the inspector's carriage wheels echo faintly one last time before vanishing into the maze of streets. Inside, the women rest, not because danger is gone, but because fatigue demands its turn. Let's stay here a moment longer. It's where the next heartbeat lives. The night will cool into reflection. The hour when work gives way to thought, and the women who keep London entertained finally wonder what they've been keeping of themselves. Midnight in London carries its own perfume, half smoke, half exhaustion. The fog that once flirted with the windows now presses close, as though it wants to listen. Inside the house, the air is thick with layered scents. Sherry, powder, candle wax, and the faint trace of human heat that lingers long after laughter has left. The night has worked hard. It smells like proof. Clara stands before the washstand, sleeves rolled up, hair unpinned. The mirror in front of her is streaked with condensation, a blurred version of honesty. She leans forward, meeting her reflection through the mist, and begins to undo the day. The basin water is lukewarm, the soap a pale oval worn thin from repetition. She dips the cloth, wrings it out, and presses it to her face. Rouge dissolves first, it always does. Then the powder fades, and beneath it, her own skin returns, pink from friction and faintly raw. She breathes in deeply. It smells of clean water and effort. Respectability washes off faster than rouge. It comes off in streaks, vanishing down the drain before anyone has time to miss it. The city would be horrified if it saw how easily its illusions rinsed away. Clara studies her face again, the faint shadows under her eyes, the powder's ghost clinging near her hairline. She looks neither young nor old, just awake. A woman who has survived another shift of pretending. From the next room comes the muffled sound of Annie humming a lullaby, her voice small and steady. It's a tune borrowed from somewhere, part hymn, part sailor's song. The melody drifts through the thin wall like warmth from another fire. Clara smiles faintly. The house is quieter now, each creak settling into its own kind of peace. Mrs. Pembroke's door has closed. cook's snores rise and fall like a gentle tide. Even the clock in the hall ticks with restraint, as though mindful not to disturb what remains of dignity. Clara picks up her hairbrush and begins the nightly ritual. 100 strokes, not for beauty, but for rhythm. The bristles scrape through her hair, releasing the faint scent of rose pomade. Each pass feels like counting the hours backward. Somewhere between 60 and 70, she stops, sets the brush down, and opens the drawer beneath the mirror. Inside is a small, battered notebook. The cover is soft from use, the corners bent like tired elbows. She opens to a page near the middle. The handwriting inside is small and careful, rows of neat ink that march in quiet defiance of the world outside. It isn't a diary exactly, or an inventory of truth too small for confession and too fragile for speech. Tonight she writes 3 new lines. 1, no one ever pays for the silence, only the service. 2, perfume hides nothing, it only makes the lie smell sweet. 3, dignity is not a gift, it's a muscle. It hurts when you use it. She reads them back once, then closes the notebook, sliding it beneath her pillow where secrets and sleep are meant to meet halfway. The lamp beside her flickers. She adjusts the wick until the light steadies, its glow turning the room to amber. Dust motes drift lazily through the beam, tiny dancers with nowhere to be. Her hands, still damp from washing, leave faint marks on the wooden table. They'll dry by morning. Everything does eventually. For a while, she sits on the edge of the bed, looking at the small world she calls her own. A folded shawl, a chipped cup, a hairpin gleaming faintly in the half-light. Objects with no ambition, only endurance. Outside, a carriage rattles by, its wheels clicking over cobblestones like a distant metronome. London is never fully asleep. It merely changes its face after midnight. Annie's humming fades into silence, replaced by the slow rhythm of her breathing. Clara imagines her friend asleep, one hand tucked under her cheek, the other curled near her heart as if guarding something invisible. The thought feels strangely comforting. The idea that somewhere within this worn-out house someone still dreams kindly. Clara turns her attention back to her own reflection. Without powder or candlelight, her features look plainer but somehow freer. The skin around her eyes has softened. The corners of her mouth have forgotten to pose. She touches her cheek lightly, as though introducing herself again. Beneath her fingertips, her pulse beats steady, ordinary, alive. It's the most honest thing in the room. The air grows colder. She reaches for the blanket at the foot of the bed and wraps it around her shoulders. The fabric smells faintly of soap and something warmer. Her own body's persistence. It isn't comfort exactly, but it's enough. On the floor beside her sits the small bowl where she's poured out the day's earrings, pins, and loose change. The coins gleam dully, their edges softened from countless exchanges. Each one carries a ghost of conversation, a moment rented, a name forgotten. She considers writing them down too, but decides against it. Some truths are too tired to be recorded. The clock in the hallway begins to strike. Each note stretches, solemn and slow. 1, 2, 3, 12. Midnight again. The boundary between what was endured and what will be endured next. She listens until the echoes fade into the silence. Somewhere far away, perhaps across the river, another clock answers, its chime faint but familiar. London's heartbeat, divided among 1,000 towers, each pretending to keep order. She lies down, the blanket still wrapped around her, the lamplight still burning low. Sleep doesn't come easily, not yet. Her mind drifts through fragments of the evening, the inspector's polished boots, Mr. Harland's awkward smile, Mrs. Pembroke's unshakable poise. She wonders how much of their composure is costume and how much has grown permanent from being worn too long. Maybe that's what respectability really is. Not virtue, just muscle memory. Her eyes close and then open again. The ceiling above is uneven, small cracks tracing maps that lead nowhere. She imagines following them like roads to someplace quieter, less exacting. A shore, perhaps, a horizon without clocks. The thought hovers for a moment, gentle and impossible, the candle gutters sending a thin curl of smoke into the air. The smell mingles with everything else, soap, skin, fatigue, until it becomes the scent of survival itself. Clara exhales and turns onto her side. The notebook under her pillow presses lightly against her temple, a reminder that even unspoken words have weight. Midnight holds the room like a closing hand. The world beyond continues its restless calculations, carriages, debts, sermons and dreams. But here, for a few borrowed hours, stillness belongs to her. And so, the story leans closer, whispering what comes next. The outside world will start whispering again, pamphlets in the street, good intentions at the door, and the curious sound of strangers trying to save what they don't understand. Morning returns with a paper rustle. The fog has thinned to a pale gauze, and the street carries the soft shuffle of shoes that believe in daylight. Somewhere a vendor sings about hot rolls with a faith usually reserved for angels. Inside, the house smells of damp curtains and yesterday's perfume, a reminder that respectability sleeps late. Nora brings the first news. She bursts into the kitchen clutching a handful of pamphlets, breathless from importance. Women in the square, she says, handing these out, hats with pins sharp enough to hold up heaven. Cook takes one, squints and declares, "Salvation printed on cheap paper. Must be a new season." She sets the kettle on. The whistle answers like an eager convert. Clara accepts a pamphlet, fingertips catching on the rough edge. The cover shows a drawing of a fallen woman being lifted by a hand that clearly did not fall. The title promises reform, rescue, and moral ventilation. She traces the ink, smudged where rain met righteousness. Annie leans over her shoulder, one eye still shadowed where last night's bruise is learning moderation. "Do they name us?" Annie asks. "Or just save us from a distance?" Clara turns the page. "From a very safe distance." Mrs. Keating enters with her ledger, as if summoned by fonts. She plucks a pamphlet from the pile and reads a line aloud. "Sisters imperiled by vice, trapped by disease and despair." She pauses. "You'd think we were a drowning village," Cook snorts. "We are, only the water is invisible and everyone insists it's champagne." The bell rings faintly from the front hall. Mrs. Pembroke glides through, hat already on, gloves snapped sharp. "I'll speak with them," she says, gathering two pamphlets as if they were visiting cards. "We shall be grateful, dignified, and unavailable." She leaves a wake of perfume and policy behind her, the door closing like a carefully phrased refusal. Clara takes her tea to the window. Outside, 3 women stand near the corner, respectable silhouettes in sensible bonnets. Their skirts are clean, their voices firm, their baskets full of printed pity. One of them speaks to a passer-by with the passion of a sermon and the manners of a shopkeeper. Meaning well looks very tidy in daylight. Annie joins Clara at the sill. "They'll send us to a rescue home," she says, half teasing, half wary. "We'll be saved into laundry." Clara sips her tea. "We'd look splendid in regulation grey." Annie laughs softly, then winces at her own amusement. The bruise has not yet learned the joke. They settle at the table and read. The pamphlet's sentences march in a good posture. Statistics about sin, advice about turning from temptation, an account of a soul who chose virtue and was rewarded with domestic service. The words carry the faint echo of a drawing room, where carpets cushion every moral. Clara's eyes catch on a paragraph about laws and health, how men in offices can make women clean by decree. She closes her eyes briefly. The idea smells of ink and certainty. She keeps reading, but slowly, as if carrying the paper uphill. The writers imagine women as mirrors, breakable, reflective, and useful only when spotless. They mean well. Meaning well is a start. It's not a plan, but it's direction, and in this city a direction is a luxury. Annie taps the page. Here, they say a movement is growing. Ladies petitioning Parliament to end the examinations. Clara nods. Not today, not tomorrow, but one day the law will have to learn embarrassment. She doesn't say the names she's heard whispered. Women who will soon stand in halls and insist the state stop policing bodies in the name of hygiene. History has a way of arriving late but staying for supper. Nora hovers, curious and a little dazzled. Do you think they'll help us? She asks. Truly help? Clara turns the paper over in her hands. They might. Or they might help the version of us they prefer. Both are better than being unseen. Nora considers that as if tasting new bread. I wouldn't mind being seen, she says, then blushes. Properly, I mean. Cook pats her shoulder. Properly as a moving target, love. Footsteps return in the hallway. Mrs. Pembroke reappears, cheeks slightly flushed from diplomacy. She sets a pamphlet on the counter as if it were a delicate pastry. They are respectable, she announces, and deeply determined. I encourage them to direct their kindness towards City Hall. She removes her gloves, one finger at a time, like a woman undressing a sentence. We will not be visited again today. Did they offer salvation? Annie asks. Frequently, Mrs. Pembroke replies. I informed them we were already saved by cleanliness and punctuality. She picks up the kettle, pours hot water into the teapot, and sighs with the composure of a saint. Progress always begins as polite interference. It later matures into policy. She glances at Clara. You may keep one. Reading improves composure. Clara folds the pamphlet along its spine, not in disdain, but for portability. The house resumes its breathing. Cups clink. A broom whispers across the floor. The fire hums in its small iron throat. Outside, the reformers move on, baskets lighter, hearts heavier with purpose. A lamplighter passes them, his ladder like a wooden hymn. He lifts daylight into evening one globe at a time. Reform and routine travel well together. Upstairs, Clara sits on her bed and opens the pamphlet again. The paper crackles, a dry leaf taken indoors. She reads slowly this time, letting the tone wash over her. The sentences believe in redemption the way bankers believe in interest. They also believe nothing bad will happen to people with good intentions. It's a comforting theology. It just doesn't cover fees. She takes out her small notebook and writes 3 lines under last night's truths. 4. Pity travels in daylight. Respect arrives after dusk. 5. A sermon is a bargain where only one side knows the price. 6. Good intentions are seeds. They need water, not applause. She closes the notebook and sits for a while, holding both papers, the sharp little pamphlet and the quiet book of her own making. Between them is a future that hasn't learned to speak yet. Annie knocks and enters without waiting, carrying a slice of toast like a truce. Cook says you forgot breakfast, she says. The room smells of butter and yesterday's perfume, a small argument between honesty and effort. Clara accepts the toast. Tell Cook I am alive by her grace. Annie smiles. She already knows. They eat on the bed like schoolgirls, legs tucked beneath their skirts. Annie turns the pamphlet over, frowning. They want us to begin again, she says. How does one begin again? With shoes, Clara answers, preferably ones that fit. Annie laughs, softer this time. The bruise accepts it. Rain begins lightly, a rehearsal rather than a performance. The sound beads on the window, tiny halos sliding down glass. Clara rises, crosses the room, and takes a worn prayer book from the drawer. It isn't piety she wants, just the weight of something that survived many hands. The leather is cracked, the page is thin, the margins scribbled in someone else's neat despair. She slips the pamphlet inside as a bookmark. The modern folded into the ancient good intentions pressed between worn-out psalms. She returns to the bed and sets the book on her lap. "They mean well," she says. "Meaning well is a start. The rest is labour." Annie nods. "We're good at that." "Yes," Clara says. "We are." Downstairs, the clock strikes the quarter hour. The sound carries up the stairwell in measured reassurance. In the street, the last of the reformers turns the corner, bonnets bobbing like small boats caught by a gentler tide. Somewhere, a printing press clatters on, turning faith into paper at an admirable rate. Progress loves machinery. People must simply try to keep up. Clara closes her eyes for a moment. The room is warm enough, kind enough, simple enough to pass for peace. She thinks of the future the pamphlet promises. Cleaner laws, fewer lies, a softer vocabulary for survival. Perhaps one day the doctor will arrive without the weight of judgment. Perhaps one day the police will knock only for thieves who actually steal. Perhaps one day respectability will be the absence of cruelty rather than the purchase of silence. It's not impossible, it's just far. She opens her eyes and places the prayer book on the table, the pamphlet's edge peeking out like a ribbon. The page it marks is titled with a word about mercy. She does not read it. Mercy today is toast shared on a tidy bed and a bruise that allows laughter. What follows isn't different, just another face of the same endurance. Dawn will keep its small promises. Clean linens drying by the stove, bags quietly packed, and a morning that asks less for performance and more for care. Dawn arrives not as light, but as an idea, hesitant, grey, and slightly guilty for interrupting. The fog lingers, reluctant, to leave, and the air smells of toast mingled with yesterday's perfume. In the kitchen, cook stands over the stove, coaxing life out of a tired fire. The kettle hums like an old friend who has run out of stories. Clara enters quietly, hair pinned loosely, shawl draped over her shoulders. The warmth of the stove wraps around her like a soft scolding. Cook slides a slice of bread toward her. "Breakfast," she says, "because miracles require fuel." Clara smiles. "Then I'll take 2. Annie arrives next, carrying a small carpet bag that looks too hopeful for its contents. Her face is pale but calm, the bruise now the faint colour of resignation. "I'm going to my cousin's," she says, "near Shoreditch, just for a while." Cook looks up from the pan. "A visit or an escape?" Annie shrugs. "Whichever ends first." Clara sets down her tea. "You'll need another dress," she says, and the weather's turning again. She disappears upstairs and returns with a folded bundle. A spare gown, worn but clean. "Take this," she says, placing it in Annie's hands. "You can amend it on the train if you're feeling industrious." Annie laughs softly. "I'll probably just stare out the window until I invent a future." The 2 women sit at the table, folding and refolding the gown, tucking pins into the seams, adding a ribbon to make it seem deliberate. The act feels both practical and ceremonial, like preparing for a journey the world might not believe in. Mrs. Keating enters with her ledger already open. "If you're leaving," she says to Annie, "do so before the inspector changes his mind about yesterday's leniency. And be sure to send word if your cousin's address is respectable." Annie nods. "She sells umbrellas." Mrs. Keating raises an eyebrow. Useful at least. The Lord disapproves of many things, but not of dryness. Cook stifles a laugh and returns to the stove. "We could all use umbrellas, the way the city drips morality." Annie begins folding her small collection of belongings. 2 handkerchiefs, a comb, a book missing its cover, and a single silver coin tied in a scrap of cloth. Clara helps her, hand steady, expression unreadable. "You'll write?" she asks. "If I find a pen that isn't judging me," Annie replies. They both smile, but it feels borrowed, like laughter rehearsed for company. The smell of toast fills the air again, thicker this time, golden and ordinary. Upstairs, Mrs. Pembroke is already awake, her door half open, her silhouette framed against the faint light from the window. She stands with the poise of a woman who has trained herself never to lean. When Annie passes with her bag, Mrs. Pembroke nods. "A family visit, I hear." "Yes, ma'am," Annie says. "Good. A woman should travel now and then." It reminds her the city isn't the only illusion available. She pauses, adjusting the cuff of her robe. "Do not forget to behave better than the people judging you," Annie smiles faintly. "I'll do my best." "Don't," says Mrs. Pembroke. "Do what's practical instead." The door closes with a sigh that sounds almost parental. Back in the kitchen, Nora is washing cups, her small hands red from the water. She looks up shyly. "Will you come back?" she asks. "Maybe," Annie says. "Maybe not." Nora frowns. "I'll keep your teacup clean just in case." "Thank you," Annie says, kissing the girl's forehead. "If I never return, you can use it when you feel like being important." Clara watches all this with a calm that isn't quite calm. It's more like containment. She remembers her own first departure years ago, from a sewing shop that paid in debt, from a room that smelled of damp straw, from a version of herself who still believed in endurance as virtue. Leaving is always the same act, only the luggage changes. When the carriage arrives, its wheels crunch softly over the wet cobblestones. Clara and Annie carry the small bag to the front door. The air outside feels sharp enough to keep secrets. The morning light paints everything in forgiving shades. Even the worn bricks look thoughtful. "Don't look back," Clara says. "It makes departures sentimental." Annie nods, stepping into the carriage. "Then you look for me instead." "I will," Clara says, "until the fog lies about the horizon." The driver clucks his tongue, the horse shifts and the wheels begin to turn. Clara watches until the carriage fades into the grey. Then she stands for a moment longer, listening to the echo of hooves. It fades quickly, like all hopeful noises in this city. When she returns inside, Mrs. Pembroke is in the parlour counting coins. The clink of metal against wood punctuates her satisfaction. "Another week balanced," she says, not looking up. "The city never runs out of arithmetic," Clara replies. Mrs. Pembroke smiles thinly. "Nor should we. Order is our only defence against meaning." Clara nods, though she isn't sure whether she agrees. She glances at the stack of coins, polished, deliberate, each representing one more night survived. The fire beside them is low but steady. She kneels and adds a few coals, watching them flare, glow and settle. Nora appears in the doorway, holding a small tray with breakfast dishes. "Should I take these upstairs?" she asks. "Leave them," Mrs. Pembroke says. "Cleanliness after counting looks like gratitude." Nora sets the tray down and slips away. The parlour smells faintly of ink, smoke, and the ghost of yesterday's perfume. Clara sits for a while, watching Mrs. Pembroke write in her ledger. Her pen moves in neat, unhurried strokes. The sound of scratching fills the room like an insect's whisper. "Annie will write," Mrs. Pembroke says without looking up. "Perhaps," Clara answers. "She's sensible," Mrs. Pembroke adds. "Sensible women come back. The world doesn't reward idealism unless it can charge admission." Clara smiles faintly. "Then the world is in fine business." Mrs. Pembroke glances up, studying her. "And you, Clara? Any thoughts of departure?" "None at present," she says. "I'm waiting for the city to blink first." Mrs. Pembroke nods approvingly. Practical, as always. When the conversation ends, Clara returns to the kitchen. The room is quiet again. Cook hums softly, the kind of tune people use to fill spaces between chores. Nora stacks dishes with military precision. The house smells of toast cooling on the rack and soap drying on the counter. Clara sits near the window, tracing a finger through the condensation. Outside, the street looks clean, almost innocent in daylight. A milk cart passes, wheels squeaking, horse exhaling clouds of steam. Somewhere, a church bell rings 9 times, a little too confidently for its congregation. She opens her small notebook again and writes, 7. Freedom, like cleanliness, is mostly symbolic. 8. Departures are quieter than people expect. That's why they last. She sets the notebook down and breathes in the morning. The soft hiss of tea, the faint sweetness of toast, the perfume that lingers because no one dares wash it away completely. Life resets itself with the discipline of habit. The house will fill again tonight with footsteps and laughter practiced for survival. But for now, there's peace in the repetition. Coins counted, cups stacked, and a window fogged with the breath of the living. The world outside may call it sin. Inside, it's just work with better lighting. The curtain hasn't fallen yet. It's only shifting its weight. It will drift towards stillness. Dreams half remembered, a horizon imagined, and the faint sound of gulls that belong to no city at all. Sleep, when it finally comes, is shallow and easily startled. By mid-morning, the house has gone still again. Mrs. Pembroke has retreated to her ledgers, Cook to her dishes, and Nora to a nap stolen behind the laundry curtain. Clara sits by the window, with her elbows on the sill, chin in her hands, watching the street as if waiting for the day to remember what it's supposed to do. The city outside stretches slowly awake. A lamplighter yawns his way home, coat collar turned up against the chill. A milkman rattles bottles with the same rhythm as yesterday and the day before. Even the pigeons look tired of performing existence. The fog has thinned into something almost elegant, and for a moment, London seems harmless, like a grand drawing room waiting for its owner to return. Clara closes her eyes. Behind them, the city rearranges itself. The sounds of hooves and carts fade. They're replaced by a low hiss, rhythmic and endless. In her mind, it is the sea. She has never seen it, but she knows its logic. Water that doesn't ask permission, wind that doesn't care for manners. She imagines standing at the shore, salt wind, cutting through the layers of soap and perfume, the smell of something honest for a change. The horizon, in her vision, stretches without ledger lines or appointments, just light and air, and a kind of silence that would make conversation unnecessary. She imagines walking there barefoot, each step dissolving behind her. No city, no inspector, no polite knock at the wrong hour, just space big enough for thought to stretch. Annie once said she dreamed of the same thing. "It's cheaper to dream than to travel," Clara had replied. The joke had stuck between them, tender and true. A distant gull cries, perhaps real, perhaps imagined. The sound slips through the fog like a letter without an address. For a moment it feels close enough to touch. She opens her eyes again. The window glass is fogged where her breath touched it. She traces a line across the pane with one fingertip, a small horizon of her own. The parlour clock ticks steadily below, marking minutes that belong to no one. In the corner of the room, her small box of possessions waits. Ribbon, coin, notebook, a tiny bar of unused soap that smells faintly of lemon. Each object is a piece of life folded small enough to hide. She wonders if Annie's cousin has a window like this one, if she too wakes to fog instead of sunlight, if freedom smells any different in Shoreditch. From downstairs comes Cook's voice, humming a tune about sailors and homecoming. The notes float upward through the stairwell, warm and unsteady. Clara lets the melody blend with the imagined sea until the two are indistinguishable. It's a fragile kind of travel, but it's travel nonetheless. She leans back and studies the ceiling, where a crack has grown slightly wider since yesterday. It runs like a river across plastered clouds, flowing nowhere, never finished. She likes it. Imperfection feels honest. She wonders if the house itself dreams, if after so many nights of laughter and lies it ever imagined standing empty, its rooms filled only with light. Perhaps even walls grow tired of listening. A knock on the door interrupts her thoughts. Not sharp this time, just two gentle taps, like a question too polite to ask itself. "Come in," she says. Nora peeks in, eyes heavy with sleep. "Mrs. Keating says you've time for a walk if you want one." "A walk?" Clara repeats. She says it's good for circulation. Is it good for reputation? Nora shrugs. She didn't mention that. Clara smiles. Tell her I'll circulate my imagination instead. Nora nods, satisfied, and disappears, leaving the door ajar. The hallway beyond smells faintly of polish and the faint sweetness of coal smoke. Each scent feels familiar enough to be almost comforting. Clara takes her notebook from the table and opens it to the next blank page. The ink has nearly run dry, so she dips the nib carefully, coaxing the last few drops from the bottle. She writes slowly, letting the quiet steady her hand. 9. Every woman builds her own map. Mine begins with a window and ends at water. 10. Peace is not a location, it's the absence of witnesses. She sets down the pen, watching the ink fade from glossy to matte. Words, she thinks, are the only currency that can't be taxed. The sound of the street drifts in through the window, vendors calling, a boy whistling off key, the rattle of a cart carrying vegetables somewhere respectable. Life continues with its usual determination. She finds comfort in that too. The city doesn't notice who's dreaming, and maybe that's mercy. A soft breeze slips through the cracked pane, bringing with it a hint of something faintly metallic, faintly green. She closes her eyes and pretends it's salt. The imagination is a generous thing. It provides details where reality is stingy. The wind becomes sea air, the carriage wheels distant waves, and the faint hum of the city transforms into the long sigh of tides that have never heard of London. In that small reverie, she stands barefoot again on her invisible shore. The sand is cool and fine, made of everything time has ground down. She imagines Annie there too, laughing without the stiffness of survival, her hair loose and unpinned. They would speak not about escape, but about quiet. How rare it is, how fragile, how worth keeping, if only for a moment. The fire downstairs pops, a reminder that warmth always comes with smoke. She opens her eyes. The fog outside the window has shifted again, revealing a glimpse of rooftops and a single line of pale blue above them. It's a small horizon, but it's real. She decides to take it as proof. From somewhere deep in the city, church bells begin to ring. Their sound climbs through the damp air, crossing miles of brick and soot, softening as it travels. It's not a call to prayer, more like an announcement that the day exists. Clara listens until the echoes fade. Then she reaches for the shawl at her feet and drapes it over her shoulders, not out of need, but out of ritual. Rituals are what keep dreams from floating away. She glances once more at her notebook. The ink has dried perfectly. The words look content. She smiles, closes the cover and places it back under the small bar of soap in her box. The box closes with a gentle click, the sound of boundaries respected. Outside, the gull cries again, real this time, perhaps strayed from the docks. Its voice cuts clean through the air, a single sharp note of certainty. She lets it linger in her chest for a moment before whispering to no one. Yes, I hear you. The house creaks softly in reply, like a companion shifting in its sleep. The morning light thickens, gold finding its courage among the grey. Clara rests her forehead against the cool glass, watching the line of the street dissolve into brightness. Somewhere, just beyond what she can see, there is water. It's enough to know it's there. If we follow the thread a little further, the horizon will shrink again, back to rooms, ledgers, and respectable facades. But the memory of that salt air will remain, tucked quietly behind the day's next performance of order. The rain returns before dawn, soft and disciplined, as if it remembers the city's schedule. It taps on the window like an accountant balancing ledgers, each drop a reminder that even clouds have obligations. The sound fills the house in polite rhythm. Water on glass, wood settling, the slow exhale of a place that has worked too hard to pretend it never sleeps. Clara wakes before the others. The room is dim, the air still heavy with perfume that no longer belongs to anyone. She sits up, draws the blanket tighter, and listens. Somewhere below, Mrs. Pembroke moves quietly, her footsteps precise, never hurried. Respectability, even at this hour, requires punctuality. Clara lights the lamp and waits for her eyes to adjust. The flame wavers, catching the edges of her small world, the hairbrush, the folded shawl, the notebook under her pillow. For a moment she thinks of opening it again, but there's nothing new to write. Some truths, once spoken, stop asking for attention. She washes her face in the cold basin, the water sharp enough to wake thought. Her reflection looks softer in the half-light, lines smoothed by fatigue, eyes steady but without argument. The skin smells faintly of soap and metal. The world outside hasn't changed, but her tolerance for it feels lighter, as though something in her has quietly forgiven itself. Downstairs, the house begins to stir. Cook coughs once, the morning signal, and the clatter of pans follows. Nora's small feet hurry along the corridor, carrying yesterday's courage into today's chores. Mrs. Keating clears her throat somewhere near the parlour, opening her ledger like scripture. The symphony of survival resumes exactly on time. Clara dresses slowly. Her gown is simple today, the grey one with mended cuffs and an unassuming dignity. The fabric smells faintly of starch and memory. She pins her hair loosely, not for display but for decency's sake. The act feels less like disguise now, more like habit. The difference between playing a role and living inside it too long. When she steps into the hallway, the smell of toast greets her again. The kitchen glows with steam and firelight. Cook is humming, Nora is stacking plates, and Mrs. Pembroke stands near the stove with her usual posture of command. "Morning," Clara says quietly. "Morning," Mrs. Pembroke replies, not looking up. "We'll have rain all day. Good for business. Men prefer to confess under grey skies." Clara smiles faintly. "Then we'll all be redeemed by evening." "If only redemption paid rent," Mrs. Pembroke says, spreading marmalade with unnecessary precision. They eat together, an ordinary act disguised as luxury. Tea warm enough to believe in, bread firm enough to count as work. Nora chatters about the pigeons nesting by the gutter. Cook complains about prices, and Mrs. Keating lectures the heir about respectability. "A woman's reputation," she says, "is the only garment that never wears out if mended often." "Then we must be expert tailors," Clara says, buttering her toast. "Indeed," Mrs. Pembroke murmurs. "London runs on well-dressed exhaustion." The laughter that follows is soft but real. It fills the kitchen with a gentleness that has nothing to prove. For a few moments, everyone seems less like a collection of tasks and more like a group of people pretending not to care that they care. After breakfast, Clara carries her cup to the window. The rain has grown steady again, its sound almost kind. The street outside gleams with reflections. Lamps, boots, umbrellas. A city rehearsing civility one puddle at a time. She watches a woman in fine clothes hurry by, her skirt lifted just enough to suggest grace. Two boys chase each other past the corner, their laughter louder than the carriages. The scene is brief, unimportant, perfect. Annie's absence hums quietly in the background. The chair she once favoured by the hearth sits empty but confident, like someone who expects to return. Clara thinks of her on a train, or maybe already among umbrellas in Shoreditch, drinking tea that doesn't taste of obligation. She imagines Annie's face pressed to a window, eyes wide at the sight of unfamiliar streets. Even freedom, she knows, must begin with surprise. Mrs. Pembroke joins her by the window. "Thinking again?" she asks. "Only rehearsing gratitude," Clara replies. "For what?" "For still being here, I suppose. For this morning, for the rain, for your toast." Mrs. Pembroke nods, eyes on the grey beyond. Endurance is the least glamorous virtue, but it lasts the longest. They stand together in companionable silence. Outside, a cart rattles past, its wheels singing softly through puddles. The scent of coal smoke seeps into the room, dense, domestic, unchangeable. London breathes its same slow breath, the one that sounds like order from a distance and exhaustion up close. Clara glances at Mrs. Pembroke's reflection in the glass, a woman sculpted by necessity, every gesture practiced until it looks effortless. "Do you ever tire of the performance?" she asks. Mrs. Pembroke's mouth curves into something almost like amusement. "Child, performance is the only reason people believe in decency. Take that away, and all you have left is appetite. And us? We're the intermission," she says. "The city rests here before resuming its virtue." Clara laughs quietly. "A noble service." "The noblest," Mrs. Pembroke replies, turning away. The day stretches on, not with drama, but with repetition. Sheets are washed, coins counted, tea brewed. The smell of soap mixes with damp wool. The clock ticks through its familiar sermon about time and obedience. Even the rain seems to have memorised its part. Respectability, it turns out, is not a single act. It's a script rehearsed until it becomes reality. In the afternoon, the fire burns low. Clara sits near it, notebook open on her knees. She writes slowly, thinking between words. 11. Respectability is a costume that eventually fits if you wear it long enough. 12. Hope is another kind of performance, quieter but no less demanding. She closes the notebook and lets her hands rest in her lap. The ink glistens faintly in the dim light, then dries without ceremony. She feels a calm that isn't pride or surrender, just a steady understanding that pretending decently is sometimes the purest form of endurance. The sounds of the street fade into evening once more. Wheels, footsteps, a distant call of a paper seller announcing news that will change nothing. Rain streaks the window in thin silver lines. Cook hums again, slower now. Mrs. Pembroke's voice floats faintly from her office, dictating figures to Mrs. Keating. The world continues its polite illusion of order, and Clara finds herself almost grateful for it. She rises, pulls the curtain halfway, and stands for a long moment in the soft, dim light. Beyond the glass, the city glows like wet stone under moonlight. Each puddle catches a reflection. Lamps, chimneys, clouds, pieces of sky pretending to belong on earth. It's a kind of beauty born from repetition, unremarkable yet undeniable. She smiles just a little and whispers, "We're all actors here, even the angels." Outside, a carriage passes, its lanterns swaying like tired stars. The clock begins to strike the hour. Somewhere far away, perhaps on another street, another woman sits by another window, performing the same quiet ritual of survival. Civilization, Clara thinks, runs on well-dressed exhaustion, and somehow that knowledge feels like peace. The rain softens again. The sound fills the room like breathing. Morning carts begin to roll in the distance, their wooden wheels humming the day awake. She sits back down, closes her eyes, and listens, not for change, but for continuity. The city, imperfect and alive, has kept its promise to begin again. And that somehow is enough. If you're still awake, congratulations, you've survived another century. If you're asleep, even better, you've escaped it.